Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is parallel in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 6, Midnight Confidence. The moon was high in the sky, the stars a bright blanket above the village. Naruto was stretched out on Kakashi's couch, one leg hanging off the edge, snoring. He'd asked Kakashi questions about his parents until his eyes refused to stay open. Kakashi answered them all, giving the boy as much information on his family as possible. Somewhere, and Kakashi would find it if it killed him, were pictures of Minato and Kushina. They started from when they were genin and through to their last days. He thought it was in a safe in the Hokage Tower, with most of their other belongings. It would be something to talk to Sandaime about. As if he wouldn't be in enough trouble once the Hokage found out Kakashi told Naruto the truth. Honestly, Kakashi couldn't bring himself to care. Looking at the little boy, thinner than he should be at his age, cheeks still plump with baby fat, hated and ostracized by the village, Kakashi knew he did the right thing. Grabbing a spare blanket, Kakashi tucked it around the blonde, gently picking his leg up and putting it back on the couch. Naruto let out a mumble but otherwise settled down. It had been a long night. Naruto had asked questions that dug up a lot of memories, things Kakashi thought he'd long buried away. The talk filled him with a lot of restless energy, a need to breathe fresh air and walk around. Naruto would be fine. The kid was out to the world, snoring loudly and drooling into his arm. Quietly, Kakashi slipped out his door and stole down the stairs. The night air hit him, spreading coolness across his face and down his arms where he'd pushed his sleeves up. Putting his head back, Kakashi looked at the stars. He'd never taken the time to stop and look at them before. Everything was fast-paced, always on the go, running from memories and responsibility. It was nice to just enjoy something for once. He'd lost track of how long he stood there, just watching the stars and the moon, when the sound of someone running reached him, the footsteps sounding loud in the still of the night. The chakra felt heavy and angry and restless. It assaulted his senses as it moved closer to him. The yellow of the streetlights hit pale skin, illuminating it in the dark. Sasuke. The boy slid to a stop, hands on his knees, and he breathed, hard and haggard. His clothes were dirty, stained with ash, and smelling like smoke. The boy looked up at him, his eyes rimmed red and bloodshot. How long? Sasuke said between breaths. Tell me, I need, please. He sounded so broken, so vulnerable. Tell me about my brother. Kakashi gripped Sasuke at the biceps, pulling him toward the stairs to his apartment. Forcing him to sit down on the chilling steps, Kakashi took the seat beside him. As Sasuke caught his breath, the heaving of his chest getting slower and slower, Kakashi put a hand on his back and rubbed over him soothingly. It was the most contact he'd ever shown Sasuke, a thought that sent a pain through his chest. Kakashi took in Sasuke's charred clothes, the soot and ash coating his sandals and exposed toes. There were burns around his mouth and on one hand. Both of them were red and raw, cracked and bleeding. The kid looked like he'd been in a fight with a flamethrower. Sasuke, talk to me. Where were you? Pale hands hung loosely from where his wrists rested on his knees. Kakashi stilled his hand but kept it on the boy's back. I couldn't do it. The trick Ida, he could do. I need to know about him, I need to be stronger than him. Sasuke let out a shuddering breath, his voice cracking as he talked. I can't be in his shadow anymore. He looked up at Kakashi, his face open and vulnerable. You promised. You're right. Kakashi gave him a solemn nod. I did promise you. And the reason for not telling you is completely selfish. I didn't want to be the one to hurt you. Sasuke looked at him, eyes shimmering with unspent emotion. I knew your brother. He was on my Umbu team. He was so young, so small. So much on his shoulders. The Uchiha weren't happy. They were planning a coup. At that, Sasuke startled. He was so young then, he probably had no idea it was happening. Itachi loved the village, and he loved his family. He was torn. I can remember when your cousin, Shisui, died. Itachi looked so broken, so alone. Kakashi ran a shaking hand through his hair. I didn't know about the coup, then. And I had no idea what Itachi was planning, that I promise you. There was a pause before Sasuke spoke again, shifting in his seat. Would you have stopped it? In a heartbeat. Their eyes met, Sasuke reading him, studying the sincerity behind his words. If he loved the village so much, why do what he did? It had been 5 years, and still, Sasuke couldn't bring himself to say the words. Kakashi understood all too well. This was the tricky part. How does Kakashi explain things he shouldn't know? What he knows came from second-hand knowledge, from visions in Obito's head, from what Naruto had briefly told him, from what he pieced together from Sasuke's own mouth. How does he explain all of that to this young boy who is so broken? His only answer was plausible deniability. They could work together to get the information from Danzo and Sandaime. Really, it was the only way. With a plan in his head and the knowledge he'd have to tread lightly, Kakashi moved his hand to Sasuke's shoulder. Let me give you the best piece of advice I'd ever been told. Look underneath the underneath. There is a reason for everything, it just takes some digging to figure it out. I don't have all the answers, Sasuke. I wish I did. What I do know is that your brother loved you, more than anything. You are all he talked about when he was on my team. He took a deep breath, trying to word this next part carefully. I never understood what happened. It never matched up with the Itachi I knew. I lived in the same house as him, but I don't think I ever knew him. Sasuke's voice was small, barely a whisper. Why leave me alive? It's just hard to believe the Itachi I knew is the same Itachi who did that. Shisui had picked on him one time for giving you piggyback rides. Hard to connect the two, you know. He knew it wasn't answering the poor boy's question. He wished he could tell him everything. There was just no way to explain how he knew. Maybe he couldn't kill you. He loved you, Sasuke. That I do know. The answer could be as easy as that. Again, he took in the boy's appearance. He was shivering, whether from emotion or the chill of the night air, Kakashi wasn't sure. Come in, Sasuke. Let's go inside. Be quiet, though. Naruto is already in there, sleeping. Why is he here? Sasuke let Kakashi pull him up and gently lead him toward the Jounin's apartment. Kakashi huffed out a humorless laugh. He also got some rough news tonight. The apartment was still dark when they entered. Naruto hadn't moved from his position on the couch, the sounds of snoring echoing off the walls. Sasuke stood in the room, unsure of what to do. He was tracking dirt and ash onto the carpet, flecks dripping from the hem of his shorts onto the floor. Kakashi opened a drawer and pulled out a pair of old Jounin pants and a shirt from his Umbu days. He handed them to Sasuke and pointed toward the bathroom, giving him a soft smile. Quietly, Sasuke slid off his sandals and walked to the bathroom. He heard the shower starting and went to his closet to get his spare futon. Sasuke would have to share the room with Naruto, but it was the best he could do. A pillow and a blanket joined the futon before Kakashi began heating the water for tea. The bathroom door opened and Sasuke's dark hair peeked around the corner. Kakashi pretended not to notice as he slowly walked toward the living room. The pants looked as if the drawstring was tied as tight as it could get. The shirt was, at least, 2 sizes too big. The kid looked comic, and it took everything Kakashi had not to laugh. How do you take your tea, Sasuke? Kakashi set out the milk, sugar, and some honey. He doesn't remember ever having tea with Sasuke. Did they ever do that before he left? He turned around to see the boy giving him an odd look. Tea always goes with rough news. No milk or sugar, just a dash of honey. Kakashi committed that to memory, filed away next to Naruto and Sakura and their ideal ways to make tea. Something so inconsequential, yet so important to him. They sat in silence, the only sound the clicking of teacup against granite countertop. Sasuke yawned, trying to hide it behind his hand. Kakashi laughed and pointed at the futon on the floor. I can go home, Sasuke said as he was walking toward his bed for the night. You don't have to. Sasuke. Kakashi put his hands on Sasuke's shoulders, leaning down to his eye level much as he does to Naruto. The last thing you need is to be alone tonight. Remember, you're on a team, now. You're not alone anymore. He squeezed his shoulders. Get some sleep. And, please, do not leave before we get awake in the morning. Don't do that to yourself. Stay here. There was a long pause, but Sasuke slowly nodded. Thank you. If Kakashi hadn't been so close, he may not have heard him. One final squeeze and Kakashi removed his hands, standing up straight. You're not alone, Sasuke. As he turned around, flicking off the kitchen light as he went, he gave one final look at the two boys in his living room. Good night. There were bags of clothes on Ino's bed. They were supposed to be buying for Sakura, but Ino found some adorable items she had to have. It was late at night, and she shouldn't still be awake, but Ino had spent an hour hiding on the stairs and listening to her father and Shikaku discussing something classified. She'd heard the name Danzo leave their mouths a few times. Something about unsanctioned missions. It was also hush-hush, and Ino absolutely loved knowing things she shouldn't know. Tomorrow she would find Shikamaru. He could help her piece it all together. With her father being the head of the analysis team and Shikamaru's father being the Jounin commander, they were always a source of confidential knowledge. Ino was trained for intelligence young. Her father would bring home encoded messages, expect Ino to have them decoded by the next day. By the time she was 5, she could break most of them in a few hours. The first time Iruka-sensei caught her with a folder that had confidential stamped on the front, Inoichi had given her a disapproving look and told her to not get caught next time. From then on, she didn't. She could sneak in and out of the restricted archives, taking and replacing documents, without breaking a sweat. Inoichi trained a ninja for stealth and intelligence gathering. He didn't realize he'd also trained one of the best analysts Konoha had ever known. He basically trained his replacement. He couldn't be prouder. It was late at night. Shikaku had just left, the case file he'd given Inoichi a heavy presence on his desk. As he was getting ready for bed, checking locks and traps, there was a knock at the door. A glance around showed that Shikaku didn't forget anything, so who was at his door at 1:15 till midnight? Opening the door showed a pink-haired girl, one he remembered from when Ino was younger. The girl was crying, her face mottled red as tears streamed down her face. She had a red outfit on that was torn in a jagged line, a backpack slung over her shoulder, and a mesh bag in her hand. The girl looked so small and broken. He racked his brain for a name. He'd heard Ino say it before, about her being a rival or something. Sakura, is it? The girl looked up, wiping her eyes with her arm. Are you in trouble? Other than her cut-up outfit and the gauze wrapped around her leg, she didn't look physically harmed. The girl shook her head. Her mouth opened to say something, but only sobs came out. Come in. I'll get Ino. With a yell up the stairs, he turned back to Sakura. Having a daughter of his own, and being a single dad, Inoichi had some experience with crying preteen girls. He leaned down in front of her, hunkered down on his heels, and wiped at the tears on her cheeks. She looked so vulnerable, it struck him just how young the kids are when they become genin. He heard footsteps on the stairs. Ino was asking him what he wanted but stopped mid-sentence when she saw Sakura. Sakura. Ino briskly came to her side. What happened? Seeing Ino caused the tears to come faster, the sobs to get harder. Sakura dropped her bags on the floor and flung herself at Ino. They kicked me out. Ino's eyes widened. I can't come home, until I quit. Quit what? Ino pulled back far enough to see Sakura's face. Being a ninja. The answer hung in the air around them. Inoichi as shocked as Ino was, their eyes meeting over Sakura's shoulder. Something dark passed over the young blonde's face, something vindictive. He'd seen that face before. He, himself, makes it when he's furious. There was a time that look had made Inoichi hold back laughter, his small daughter looking so comic with that amount of anger on her face. Now, at 12, and a genin, that look was terrifying. Ino had Sakura held in her arms, protected in the embrace as the pink-haired girl cried. The man felt his daughter's anger. He could understand parents not being happy their child chose to be a ninja, to put their lives on the line in dangerous missions where the odds are stacked against them. The graveyard was full of ninja who met their end too soon. It was a sad reality when living in a ninja village. Ino pulled back, looking into Sakura's face. Do you remember where my room is? Go put your stuff in there, I'll be up in a minute. The girl nodded, dragging herself up the stairs. Once out of earshot, Ino turned on her dad. Dad. What the hell? Inoichi sighed, shaking his head in disbelief. I'm honestly speechless. See if you can find out what exactly happened. If her parents are honestly that terrible, then she can stay here. We have a spare room, just have to clean it out. We're on the same wavelength, Dad. It's getting scary. Ino turned around, her hair whipping around her, and climbed the stairs. Inoichi was starting to wonder what kind of monster he created. As soon as Ino entered her bedroom, Sakura was standing and fidgeting. I'm sorry. You didn't have to deal with that. I didn't know where else to go. Stop, Sakura. Sit down. Ino grabbed Sakura's shoulders and forced her to sit on the edge of the bed. Tell me what happened. Digging the heel of her hand into her eyes, Sakura growled in frustration. The problem was, no matter how much she explained, she would always look like the bad guy. Her parents fought with passive-aggressive comments and well-placed guilt trips. They talked and talked until Sakura's ears rang and her head hurt. Anything Sakura did could be warped, twisted into everything being her fault, her bad decisions, her anger problem. Tonight was a prime example. Sakura had come home, uniform still cut and asymmetrical. The first comment she got was about how much that outfit had cost at the tailor. Her father registered the bandaged leg, which sent him into a one-sided conversation about young girls not being meant to have scars. Her mother stood at the kitchen sink, washing dishes and not looking at Sakura at all. Her father sat at the kitchen table, newspaper in his hand and a steaming cup of coffee in front of him. He peered over his paper at Sakura, taking in her frazzled appearance, her bandage, and uniform. Her father looked at her with disappointment. His daughter, the top kunoichi at the academy, with nearly perfect chakra control, with a jounin sensei that believes in her, wants her to succeed, and he was disappointed. She stomped her feet, raised her voice, hit the table so hard the coffee cup upset. She begged and pleaded, tried to get them to listen, to understand what being a ninja meant to her. Other than cleaning up the coffee, there was no reaction. They still weren't listening. Sakura didn't know what else to do. Angry tears were clinging to her lashes, making her vision watery. I'm a genin. Sakura stood up straight, puffing her chest out, willing herself not to cry. In Konoha, that makes me an adult. I can be a ninja if I want to be. That got a reaction. Her father's cold eyes landed on her, one eyebrow raised. Did you hear that? Sakura is an adult. Our little girl, to whom we gave life, everything she would ever want or need, is an adult. His voice was calm, monotone. Sakura shivered. Well, since you're an adult, you don't need our hospitality. We have dealt with your undesirable behavior long enough. As long as you are a ninja, do not come back here. Sakura didn't take long to grab everything she needed. It wasn't until she hit the cold streets that she realized she had nowhere to go. She didn't know her team well enough to just bunk at their homes. What she needed was somewhere she could break down and not be judged. As she sat in Ino's bedroom, recounting everything she'd gone through that evening, Sakura knew she chose the right place. Ino's soothing hand on her back, her other hand a warm presence on Sakura's arm, it felt right. A while later, Sakura had a shower. She slipped on Ino's pajamas and curled up in her bed. All the frustration and pain of the fight seeped out of her, leaving Sakura numb. Ino's fingers combed through her hair, twisting the damp strands around her slender digits. That's how Sakura fell asleep, comfortable and cared for. The morning sun filtered in through the living room blinds. It hit Naruto's face, heating the skin where the sliver touched. Blue eyes blinked open, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings. Instead of peeling yellow walls, he saw bright white with dark oak trim. The chair he was sitting in the previous night now held his jacket, tools, and headband. Someone had folded it, stacking the items neatly on the chair seat. When Naruto heard a soft groan come from the floor, he looked down to see Sasuke on a spare futon. His dark hair surrounded him like a halo, one arm bent above his head, the other across his stomach. His face was scrunched up, his fingers twitching as if trying to grasp something. Naruto leaned over, looking at the usually stoic boy. Sasuke had always had a presence, even as a young boy. Even in the academy, when they were children in single digits, Sasuke could command a room just by walking into it. In the beginning, Naruto hated him. He hated the way Sasuke got all the attention, all the acknowledgement Naruto wanted and ignored it. He hated how skilled Sasuke was, the way he could dominate test scores and taijutsu matches so easily. Then, one day, he heard the grown UPS talking. A lot of people had died, an entire district eradicated. They talked about one survivor, a small boy with dark eyes and dark hair, about how he refuses to cry, refuses to talk. Sasuke wasn't in class with him for a week. Naruto won the taijutsu matches against Kiba and Koji, but they were boring. There was no challenge, no working up a sweat, no fun. Then Sasuke came back and he was different. He didn't talk, didn't look at anyone, didn't even want to spar. It took almost a month, but Sasuke finally joined in a sparring session, and he was vicious. The harder Sasuke punched, the harder Naruto retaliated. In the end, Iruka-sensei pulled them off each other. On opposite sides of the room, they stayed after class, forced to keep a leaf on their heads while Iruka-sensei graded papers. After detention, Naruto was told about the massacre, and that Sasuke was the only survivor. He was told to be nice to Sasuke. After that, Naruto wasn't the only one whispered about behind hands, heads tilted together, eyes cold as they looked at him. Now he watched Sasuke standing in a crowd, people staring at him and whispering. Naruto didn't feel so alone, anymore. This morning, however, Sasuke was showing more emotion in his sleep than he ever did when awake. He was still groaning, fingers and legs twitching. Then, without warning, Sasuke's eyes popped open and he sat straight up, a scream caught in his throat. Naruto jumped back, watching as Sasuke breathed hard and heavy. Sasuke. The boy in question jumped. Hey, you okay? Naruto crawled off the couch, hitting his knees in front of Sasuke. His eyes were wild, looking all over the apartment, not settling on one thing too long. Naruto reached up, tentatively touching Sasuke's shoulder. The boy jumped again. Sasuke, hey, it's okay. It was a nightmare. Finally, Sasuke's eyes found Naruto's. Nightmare? Yeah. You were groaning and twitching in your sleep. Sasuke was sweating, his eyes wide and still a little wild. He was wearing clothes way too big for him, making Sasuke look more childlike as he sat there. He pulled his knees up to his chest and looked at Naruto, embarrassed. It's okay, Sasuke. Everyone has nightmares. It was more a memory. Sasuke hugged his knees, looking down at his hands. With everything he and Kakashi talked about the night before, it brought back a lot of memories he'd tried to keep buried. Walking into the house and seeing Itaka standing over their parents, sword in hand and eyes glowing, replayed in his head. It wasn't some terrible thing his subconscious made up, this was a nightmare he lived through. Naruto tilted his head, looking at Sasuke as if putting together a puzzle. Oh, you mean the dash? Yeah. Sasuke cut him off. He couldn't say the words himself, not even in his head. He didn't know if he could handle hearing Naruto calling it what it was, a massacre. Sasuke was so used to people looking at him with that look, eyes full of pity as they whisper about the poor lone survivor. When he looked at Naruto, he didn't see that. Instead, he saw understanding. If anyone would understand what it was like to be alone, it would be Naruto. I don't want to talk about it. Naruto put his hands up in surrender. Okay. But, why are you here? Getting answers. Naruto raised an eyebrow, urging the boy to continue. Kakashi knows things about that man. Sensei is smart. Naruto agreed. It's why I'm here, too. Getting answers. He got a faraway look in his eyes. Sasuke watched as his line of sight moved to the team picture on Kakashi's windowsill. He felt like he had all the puzzle pieces to a secret without knowing it. What would Kakashi's genin team have to do with Naruto? Sasuke turned his head to look at the picture, too. Did you see Sensei as a genin? He wore that stupid mask then, too. Sasuke hummed in response. Oh. Sasuke. The boy in the goggles, he's an Uchiha, too. And the blonde guy, that's the Yondaime. An Uchiha? Sasuke asked, pushing himself off the futon. He grabbed the frame in his hands, tilting it toward the sunlight. Uchiha always looked similar. Dark hair and dark eyes and soft facial features. They all had hardness in their eyes, a steel resolve only Uchiha seemed to be born with. This guy almost didn't look like an Uchiha. Maybe it was his youth, or maybe the goggles on his head, but he just didn't look like the rest of them. Naruto stood beside him. I can't remember his name. Sensei did tell me. He pointed at the blonde in the picture. Can you believe Sensei was trained by the 4th Hokage? That's crazy. We are all gonna be insanely powerful, right? Snorting at Naruto's enthusiasm, Sasuke shook his head. Yeah, sure. We'll all be Umbu level by next week. The blonde nudged their shoulders together, nearly knocking the picture from Sasuke's hand. Sasuke retaliated, hip-bumping him back. It didn't take long for it to progress into a wrestling session, the two boys knocking the couch askew and flipping the chair over, Naruto's headband sliding under the couch. Kakashi heard the noise and jumped out of bed, confused as to what the two boys were doing. When he reached the living room and saw the state of it, he laughed. Sasuke had Naruto in a headlock, the blonde scratching at pale arms and cursing. They both paused when they heard Kakashi, both looking at him oddly. When he finally settled down, and the boys had let go of each other, Kakashi pointed at the furniture. Clean up and I'll make breakfast. The smell of an actual breakfast being homemade filled Sasuke with nostalgia. If he closed his eyes, he could see his mother standing at the kitchen counter, see his father drinking tea at the head of the table, see Itachi walking into the room and taking his seat across from him, only smiling at Sasuke and their mother. Sasuke stopped, his whole body freezing. Father and Itachi weren't talking. In his memory, he could still see them not even looking at each other. Why weren't they talking? He turned around, looking at Kakashi's back as he chopped vegetables. Their talk from the night before floated through his mind. He said the clan wasn't happy, that Itachi had a lot on his shoulders. What else did Kakashi know? Did Itachi actually love him enough to leave him alive? Did the brother who gave him piggyback rides really just snap and murder his entire clan? Or was there more to it? As he returned to the task at hand, helping Naruto arrange the living room, Kakashi's words from the night before kept repeating in his head. See underneath the underneath. Chapter 7, Can't Go Home Again. There was a time in Inoichi's life where he'd thought the person who dealt with civilian affairs had it easy. There were no forbidden jutsu, rouge shinobi spies, or hidden messages. What he didn't realize was how conniving and manipulative civilians could be. It was as if what civilians lacked in chakra ability, they made up for in mind games. No one could have prepared him for the Haranos. The entire time he had known Sakura, she was always a sweet, shy girl, clinging to Ino like a security blanket. He never would have pictured that the uncaring parents that stood in front of him were capable of creating the pink-haired girl he knew. Inoichi had sent the girls on their way that morning, each of them heading to their respective team training sessions, while he heads off toward Sakura's home. Ino had told him what Sakura said. Inoichi wasn't pleased. He wanted to confront the parents who could willingly kick a 12-year-old girl from their home in the middle of the night. Genin or not, adult or not, she was still a child. As parents, they have a responsibility to protect and love their child. It's not something you did when you felt like it, or when it was convenient for you. Sakura's father, Kaizashi, had answered the door when Inoichi knocked. The passive-aggressive tone the man took with him set Inoichi's teeth on edge. He could handle liars, psychopaths, and people who are just plain crazy. What he couldn't handle were people who lied while believing their own lies. Kaizashi spun this tale, this absolute fabrication, about Sakura taking a temper tantrum over nothing. She's been like this since she was little. Kaizashi had his arms crossed as he talked. Her mother and I have talked about getting her help, seeing someone for her angry outbursts, but we always decided to handle it ourselves. Then we thought maybe the academy would calm her down, teach her discipline. He paused to shake his head. We can't handle her outbursts anymore. Aren't there apartments she can live in? The ones for the orphans. Inoichi turned around and left before he slapped the man. He was lying through his teeth. No matter how well someone lied, or how well they thought they lied, micro-expressions always give them away. You can't school your entire body, no matter how hard you try. He'd learned from Marino Ibiki. He'd learned from the best. As he stomped off to where Team 7 trained, Inoichi tried to calm down. His hands flexed at his sides, his teeth hurt from gritting them, his feet hurt from how hard he was walking. He'd never been so happy to see the training field come into view. Inoichi knew his chakra must be on fire with the way Kakashi met him outside of the field, at the edge of the dirt path. Want you to know, Inoichi was still seething. That Sakura is living with us from now on. Kakashi's eyebrow raised. Her parents are terrible. She showed up at our door last night crying. They kicked her out. Fuck, Kakashi, I don't know what else to do. The thing about Inoichi that always amazed Kakashi, the man doesn't swear. He'd always held the idea that anyone can say what they are trying to say without adding verbal flair. To hear the man willingly throw out a word like that meant something had shaken him, badly. Kakashi glanced back to Sakura, dressed in her more suitable training clothes, and knew she'd been acting strange all morning. There was something careful in the way she moved, in the way she refused to maintain eye contact. He'd planned on cornering her after practice, to talk to her. Why would they kick her out? Kakashi tried not to let the anger seep into his voice. The man would pick it up anyway, but Kakashi did give it an effort. Inoichi snorted. Because they don't want her to be a ninja. That gave Kakashi a start. The Sakura from before never said anything about her parents hating her career choice. Were there red flags Kakashi missed? Even without changing anything important, just him being there was changing the timeline. The only thing that happened the previous day was Sakura cutting her dress and leg. Did that set it off? On the training field, Sakura faced off against Sasuke and Taijutsu. Naruto cringed every time Sakura took a hit, fighting back shouting something at Sasuke. When Sakura was slow to block, taking a hit in the side from Sasuke, Kakashi braced himself for a scathing remark, ready to jump in case Naruto started a fight. Instead, Sasuke helped the girl up and showed her what she did wrong. He didn't yell, didn't insult, didn't condescend. He just helped her. Turning back to Inoichi, Kakashi hooked a thumb over his shoulder. Well, she's an adult now. She can do whatever she wants. If she wants to live with you, that's fine with me. I should be asking you if you're sure. Two preteen girls. Inoichi laughed. I'm a masochist. He glanced over at the pink-haired girl, something soft coming over his features. I'll be back to pick her up after work. She needs to know where her home is from now on. Kakashi nodded. See you then. He waved Inoichi off. I crinkled up into a smile. When Inoichi's profile disappeared around the corner, Kakashi turned back to his team. Sakura was sitting on the ground, her chest heaving with exhaustion. This Sakura worked a lot harder than the genin Sakura he left behind. Her knees were covered in dirt, bruises coating her arms and legs. There was blood trickling from a split lip. Sasuke knelt in front of her, a rag held in his hand. He looked up when he sensed Kakashi, his expression flat. You okay? Kakashi knelt down beside Sakura, hooking a finger under her chin and tilting it up. He wanted to look at the cut on her lip, to see how bad it was. Just a small tear, it looked worse than it was with the blood on her chin. When he let go, she nodded. Good girl. Glancing over at Sasuke, he saw the kid hand Sakura the rag. How is she doing? Sasuke was the best of the three in Taijutsu. He was also a good teacher. When Kakashi could get the other Sasuke to calm down, put his revenge aside, and focus on his team, the boy taught them well. A lot of what Naruto knew was based on him watching Sasuke. He wanted them to work as a team, now. Letting them share their strengths with each other was a great start. Kakashi watched as Sasuke picked the right words, put them in order in his mind, before speaking. It seemed their talk the night before about Itaki had calmed him, if only a little. She's better. He paused as Naruto came over with the water, handing it to Sakura. You overthink your moves, it's what makes you slow. Sakura looked up, her arm paused at her mouth where she was wiping off the blood. This was probably the best conversation these two have ever had. I know we're only sparring, Sakura, but you have to hit me like you mean it. She dropped her arm and nodded. Well, Kakashi smiled. That's nothing we can't work on. Good job, Sakura. He stood up and pointed at Naruto. Your turn, Blondie. Sasuke, you still good. As the boys sparred, Kakashi held out a hand to help Sakura up. Feel okay? She nodded. While the boys are busy, let's talk a minute. It only took the tone of his voice. How did you know? Sakura's voice was low, she kept glancing at the boys. Just the way Kakashi had said it, the small bit of emotion that hinted he knew exactly what had happened the night before. It just happened. Kakashi put a hand on her shoulder. I'm not sure if they teach you this in the academy, but let me explain something to you. As your Jounin sensei, I become your guardian until you become Chunin level. Technically, yes, you are an adult when you become a genin, but you're still young, you still need guidance. This rule was created for the orphans who become shinobi, to help protect them. Sakura tilted her head as he talked, trying to see where he was going with this conversation. As your guardian, you could have told me if your parents were hurting you. She shook her head, her hair whipping around with force. No one believes it. Her voice rose as she talked, the boys paused to glance at her before returning to their spar. No one sees it. Abuse isn't just physical, Sakura. Inoichi told me while you and Sasuke were sparring. He talked to your dad, saw what you dealt with, and believes you. I believe you. Kakashi watched as tears welled up in her eyes. I'm perfectly fine with you living with the Yamanakas. If your family tries to pull anything, I can invoke my rights as your Jounin sensei to keep you away from them. Sakura looked up at him, fat tears rolling down her face. She flung herself at him, wrapping her arms around his waist and burying her face into his chest. Thank you, sensei. I want to stay with Ino and her dad. Okay. Kakashi rubbed her back. Then that's what will happen. When the sun was setting, Inoichi showed up with Ino in tow to pick up Sakura. Covered in dirt and bruises, she ran to them with a smile on her face. There were mentions of sushi as the girls followed behind Inoichi's towering form. After their talk, Sakura seemed to settle down and re-engage with the team. Formation training and ninja tool training went smoothly after that. Kakashi was happy to see her lighten up. Hopefully being around Ino will pull Sakura out of her shell. The boys, however, both stood around the training posts, slowly picking up ninja tools and not making an effort to go anywhere. They kept nervously glancing at each other and at Kakashi, neither saying a word. He walked over to the boys, hands in his pockets and posture loose, with an idea of what was going on in their heads. So, Kakashi eyed his two boys. Would you two boys like to go for barbecue? Naruto immediately looked so relieved it was practically palpable. He flashed a 1,000,000-watt smile, bouncing up and down on the balls of his feet. Sasuke's shoulders drooped, letting out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He nodded in agreement while hiking the backpack over one shoulder. Kakashi sat opposite the boys in the booth, listening to Naruto ramble about training and Sasuke humming in response. He could hear a tap 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 as Naruto swung his legs under the booth, his sandals hitting the table leg. Sasuke sat still and straight, trained in how regal Uchiha is meant to conduct themselves in public. As the first order of barbecue was finished grilling, Kakashi pulled down his mask to eat. Naruto tilted his head at him, curiosity in his eyes. Hey, sensei. Why do you wear a mask? To look all mysterious. Kakashi wiggled his fingers in an effort to look magical. And it's better for stealth. Besides, when you are well known, it's better to hide your identity as much as possible. Sasuke peeked through his bangs at Kakashi. Well known. Before Kakashi could form the words, reminding them of the nickname he'd earned of Sharingan Kakashi, he stopped himself. This Sasuke didn't know. He was so used to his students knowing about the Sharingan that he didn't remember this was a new timeline, Zabuza and Haku hadn't happened yet, and Kakashi hadn't shown them the reason why Sasuke was put on his team. Well, I guess I haven't told you kids yet, have I? The reason you were chosen for my team, Sasuke, is because I also have the Sharingan. Kakashi flipped his headband up to show them the Jujutsu that never fades away. Naruto hit Sasuke's back when he nearly choked on his pork. How? Sasuke wheezed out. Did you? Did I steal it? Kakashi shook his head. Absolutely not. It was actually a gift from a dear friend. The boys stared at him, watching him with anticipation. Ah, I suppose you want the story. You boys saw the picture on my windowsill of my genin team? The other boy in the photo is Uchiha Obito. We were rivals, much like you two are. A mission went wrong and Obito got crushed under a boulder. His dying wish was for me to have his Sharingan. And the clan let you keep it. Even as young as he was when the clan still existed, Sasuke knew they kept the Sharingan close, untainted by outside influence. He couldn't imagine the elders just allowing the Sharingan to be passed to a non-Uchiha. They had to have fought you. Kakashi laughed out a wry laugh. Oh, they did fight. Had it just been my word, I don't think I'd still have it. But Rin was there, she vouched for me. They were reluctant, but I was allowed to keep it. I had to teach myself, though. He tapped his temple. What I know is all trial and error. Nodding, Sasuke returned to his food, deep in thought. Naruto, who was still swinging his legs under the table, happily ate his food. The two kids couldn't be more different. Both were thin, more than they should be at their age. Most Uchiha were long and lean, all knees and elbows and soft features. Obito was an exception to that, he was stockier than even his parents. Sasuke, however, favored his mother. Kakashi remembered when Kushina and Mikoto would sit at the tea shop and gossip, how Mikoto's long hair would fall in her face when she looked down. Kakashi would willingly admit Uchiha women were beautiful. Uzumaki men, from what Kushina had told him, were naturally stockier. She described her own father as having broad shoulders and bulky muscles. The women were deceivingly small. They hid their strength under lean muscles and fiery tempers. Being Minato's son, Naruto could have come out being long, lean, and lanky. Instead, he was born with more Uzumaki in him than Namikaze. He got Minato's hair and eyes. The rest of him was all Kushina. Kakashi got a pang in his chest when he realized how much the two missed, and how proud of their son they would have been. Of course, the other Naruto had met them, had heard firsthand what they thought of him. It's still possible this Naruto could do the same. The boy, in spite of everything he'd handled growing up, still smiled as wide as his mother, his eyes crinkling shut. The Naruto he left behind was right. Sometimes it was hard to look at him and not see Minato and Kushina. When the food was done, their bellies full, the boys idled in front of the building while Kakashi paid. Neither one of them wanted to go home to a house where they would be alone but were afraid to ask Kakashi for another night of his hospitality. Naruto kicked his sandal on the ground, hands behind his head. His backpack sat against the building as he waited. Sasuke picked at the hem of his shorts, biding his time, with his pack slung over one shoulder. When Kakashi exited the building and took in his boys, he tried hard not to smile. Nothing would make him happier than to have the two of them in his place for another night. He wanted them to think of his apartment as home. He just wished he had more room for them. The two looked so afraid to be rejected that Kakashi, although already planning on inviting them back, couldn't have made a different decision if he tried. You two need some fresh clothes. Go home and throw a bag together, we will all meet back up at the apartment in a few, okay? Both boys nodded before running off to their respective apartments. Kakashi headed toward a furniture store. He couldn't make Naruto sleep on the couch for another night. He needed another futon and another pillow. Naruto's hand paused on the doorknob. The sound of footsteps coming from inside his apartment stopped him in his tracks. With a kunai gripped tightly in his hand, Naruto slowly pushed the door open. A figure stood in the center of his room, facing his small table. They didn't see Naruto yet, continuing what they were doing. He raised something over his head before bringing it down on the table, smashing it into splinters. Naruto yelled out, making the figure jump in surprise. They ran, pushing past Naruto and out the door. He barely could get a look at the figure before they disappeared around the corner. Turning back to his room, Naruto flicked on the light to see the destruction. His bed was smashed, two of the legs missing and the mattress ripped. The few dishes he had were smashed, shards of ceramic spread out on the floor. His clothes were pulled out of the drawers and in a pile on the floor. The strong smell of lamp oil emanated from them. Tears pricked at his eyes, frustration and anger streaming down his face. All he had, now, was in his backpack. Gripping the straps tight, Naruto turned around and ran. He couldn't look at that place again. His childhood home, the only home he'd ever known, practically destroyed. He had nothing left. He didn't stop running until he reached Kakashi's apartment, slid down the door, and put his head in his hands. Sasuke's apartment was dark and cold. Eerily quiet and still. He stood there, facing his dresser, wondering what he was doing. Only days before Sasuke was ready to kill the man who destroyed his young life. He was ready to defect from the village, go on the run, whatever he had to do to reach his goal. Now he was putting clothes in a bag to stay at his sensei's home. It was such a juxtaposition to what he'd striven for, dreamed of, for 5 years. Itake's eyes, glowing red and black, appeared in front of him. The glint of his sword in the darkness. The smell of blood in the air. He slammed the drawer shut and turned around, trying to erase the image of his brother from his mind. Look underneath the underneath. Sasuke gripped at his hair, shutting his eyes tight. He was so angry the previous night, so frustrated that Kakashi kept secrets from him. It should be a weakness, it should make him sick how easily Kakashi convinced him to sleep there. But Sasuke couldn't deny how great he'd slept, nightmare aside. Having someone breathing, shifting in place, just being there, was wonderful. Being alone, sleeping in the black hole of silence and despair that was his apartment, physically hurt. Turning back around to the dresser, Sasuke resolved himself. He was tired of being alone. He was tired of restless nights and nightmares where he wakes up alone and covered in tears and sweat. What Sasuke wanted was a home. He wanted somewhere to call his. This blank apartment the Sandaime placed him in at 7 was just 4 walls. Grabbing clothes from his dresser, Sasuke jammed them in another backpack. He turned around, taking in the little belongings he had, and made sure he had everything he needed. If he got his wish, he would never come back here. One last look and Sasuke left the apartment, locking the door behind him. If there was more to the massacre, more to Itake's involvement, more to the entire situation, he wanted to know. Kakashi was his best chance at further knowledge, training, and help. As he walked down the street, dodging civilians and shinobi, Sasuke kept his head down. His mother had always told him all the emotion was written in his eyes. He could school his face, his body language, but he couldn't stop his eyes. Right then, Sasuke didn't want random strangers to see whatever emotion he was carrying with him. With one final corner, he climbed the stairs and walked down the open walkway towards the apartment. He saw Naruto sitting against the door, head bowed down and knees to his chest. Something about it tugged at him, something was wrong. He set his bags down against the wall and knelt down in front of the blonde. Naruto's not normally quiet, not normally withdrawn. Hey, Naruto. Blue eyes peeked over his knees, red-rimmed and glossy. What happened? Naruto dug his fingers into the fabric of his pants, fingertips turning white. I'm fine. He shook his head. I'll be okay. I'll just have to save up again. Naruto didn't want to answer, didn't want to see the way Sasuke would look at him. He didn't want the disgust on his face, didn't want the laughter. Not after the day he and Sasuke had, the tentative friendship the two formed over the last week. Naruto didn't want to ruin that. Instead, he stayed silent, hoping Sasuke would drop it. He was willing himself to stop crying, stop thinking about what happened, stop replaying it in his head. Kakashi had promised them some missions, some paying missions. He could slowly replace what he lost. The urge to pull Naruto's head from the cocoon he'd created rose higher. Eventually, Sasuke got tired of waiting for an answer. Instead, he pulled at the boy's hands, removing the boundary between them. Naruto. What happened? Sasuke's voice was low, commanding. Finally, Naruto looked up. He looked scared. Fighting his body, Sasuke tried to keep the worry off his face. There was a long stare-off between them before Naruto finally cracked. Someone broke into my apartment. He watched as Sasuke's eyes widened. Some stuff got destroyed. Sasuke stood up. He'd known for years that people didn't like Naruto, that people went out of their way to ignore him, pretend he doesn't exist. It never made sense to Sasuke. He thought Naruto could be loud, annoying, and always doing pranks, but it wasn't enough to treat him the way they do. But for someone to break into his apartment, as run down as it was, and destroy his stuff? That was ridiculous. Before Sasuke could do anything else, he felt Kakashi's chakra around the corner. He met the Jounin at the top of the stairs, his eyes wild. Instantly, Kakashi knew something was wrong. Naruto looked fearful, Sasuke looked angry, and Kakashi unlocked the door and quickly ushered the kids inside. Naruto moved slowly, dragging his feet. Sasuke grabbed both of his bags and practically threw them inside the door. "I'll be back." Sasuke stormed down the walkway. Naruto reached for him, yelling for Sasuke to stop, but the boy just kept walking. "Naruto!" Kakashi grabbed his shoulder, pulling him back inside and forcing the boy to sit down. "Talk to me." Frustrated tears began streaming down the kid's face. "Someone broke into my apartment." "My stuff," Sasuke was angry. "Not at you, Naruto." Kakashi wiped the tears away with his thumb. He's angry at the entire situation. Sasuke opened Naruto's apartment door. It was unlocked, but he soon saw why. Broken ceramic, splinters of wood, and a soaking wet pile of clothes met him. An overwhelming smell of oil assaulted his senses. Nothing was salvageable. It would all need to be tossed out, replaced. Sasuke knew what orphans lived on. He got the same stipend every month. He could subsidize it with the Uchiha clan money, but Naruto didn't have that to fall back on. There was no way he could replace all of this at once, not even by visiting second-hand stores. The anger he felt was palpable. He had to leave before he exploded. He ran back to Kakashi. Kakashi handed Naruto a cup of tea, patting the young boy on the shoulder. "Tomorrow, we will go get you some new clothes." Naruto sniffled. "My apartment is always open to you, there is not a question of where you will live." Letting himself in, Sasuke stood there with his hands fisted at his sides. "They destroyed everything. There's nothing left in there." "Why?" He looked right at Kakashi. The Jounin really didn't have an answer without talking to Naruto first. He looked over the boy, looking so broken and vulnerable, and was lost for words. Sasuke sat down in the chair, his eyes never leaving Naruto or Kakashi. Naruto dragged his hands through his hair, gripping at the strands. "I don't want you to hate me." Naruto's voice was so low, so soft, cracking as he talked. Sasuke's eyes widened as he took the boy in. "We just started to be friends, right? I don't want to ruin it." "Idiot." Sasuke scoffed. "I won't hate you." Naruto's eyes briefly met Sasuke's. He paused to look at Kakashi, who just nodded. "I'm the Kyuubigen hierarchy." There was just silence. Nothing except for breathing could be heard. The longer the silence stretched, the harder Naruto pulled at his hair, strands being pulled out from the root. His chest hurt, his throat felt like it was closing up. Nails dug into his scalp, white-hot pain shooting through him. He could vaguely hear Kakashi saying his name, vaguely feel the man pulling at his hands, but Naruto couldn't react. His head was spinning. Then Sasuke grabbed his face, dark eyes meeting bright blue. He held the gaze, not letting Naruto look away. "Moron, stop it." "I'm not, you didn't scare me off." It was just a lot to take in. As Naruto slowly came back, slowly let go of his hair, and uncurled from the ball he was in, Sasuke was there. He didn't let Naruto go, didn't stop talking to him. Kakashi watched with pride as Sasuke slowly talked Naruto down from a panic attack. Shaking, Naruto took the cup of tea Sasuke handed him. Kakashi rolled out the futons, throwing down pillows and blankets. "Naruto, I'll find something for you to sleep in. Go take a shower, it will help you feel better." Kakashi ruffled Sasuke's hair as he walked past. "Sasuke, you want to set up the futons." As he walked to the bedroom, trying to find another old set of clothes for the small boy to swim in, Kakashi tried to replay the events of the night. Did this happen in the other timeline? Did Naruto hide this all from them? He wanted so badly to talk to the kids he'd left behind, ask them a million questions, but he couldn't. Now, he just has to take every blow as it comes and keep moving on. Finding another pair of old Jounin pants and another old shirt he'd forgotten he had, Kakashi handed them to Naruto as the kid entered the bathroom. His face was mottled red, eyes puffy and red, hair sticking up more than usual with how hard he was gripping it. Sasuke waited in the living room. He didn't talk until the shower spray sounded from the bathroom. Kakashi. There's more, isn't there? The futons were laying side by side. Sasuke fanned out the blanket. The Kyuubi attack happened 12 years ago. Naruto had to be an infant, right? Just born. Kakashi nodded, letting Sasuke come up with the answer on his own. The Yondaime, it makes no sense for him to pick some random infant. There wouldn't have been time. The pillow was dropped at the head of the futon. He turned around and looked at Kakashi. No. It wasn't some random infant. It was his infant. The second blanket was in his hand, but Sasuke dropped it when the realization hit him. Naruto is Yondaime's son. Kakashi leaned down to his eye level. The civilians don't know. Most of the shinobi don't know. It's hidden to protect him. Yondaime's last name was Namikaze. Where did he get Uzumaki? From his mother. Sasuke nodded, lost in thought for a moment. Kakashi couldn't help but be proud of the boy for piecing it all together without much help. Let Naruto tell you on his own, okay? It was a huge step for him to tell you about the Kyuubi. I don't want to give away all his secrets without his knowledge, you understand? Again, Sasuke nodded. The shower turned off and Sasuke went back to his job of setting up the futons. I don't think of him any different. Kakashi smiled. I know. Make sure you tell him. When everyone settled down for the night, all curled up in their beds, Kakashi heard the boys' soft voices float down the hall. They talked long into the night before their voices trailed off, the boys finally asleep. Kakashi stayed awake for a while, taking in the events. Everything was happening so fast and all at once. Hours passed, and Kakashi gave up on sleep. He sat up and grabbed a notebook, writing down the training itinerary for the next week. On the back, he made a grocery list so he had the stock to feed 2 teenage boys. He was still writing when daylight shone through the window. Pages dedicated to each kid, their strengths and weaknesses, and training plans, took up many pages. In the back of the book was a list of things Kakashi wanted to change, and a list he didn't want to change. Those pages he tore out and hid underneath his mattress. He knew some people would have to be lost to progress the timeline. Some, however, he could save. As he got up, starting his morning routine, Kakashi realized he'd promised the kids a mission today. It would go a long way to taking Naruto's mind off of everything. With his clothes on and hair in some semblance of control, Kakashi made his way to the kitchen. Time to start the day. Chapter 8, Those Great Few. Their first mission as Team 7 was weeding a garden. When Kakashi gathered his kids at the training ground, he gave them all a long talk about Genin and D-rank missions. He warned them that they will be, basically, grunt work. They're meant to teach the kids about discipline and teamwork. Kakashi could think of better ways to do that besides menial labor, but it's tradition now. Even with the long talk, Naruto still took the mission as a personal attack on him. This is stupid. He stomped his foot on the wooden floor. The Hokage shook his head and sighed. We want a real mission. Before he could protest more, Kakashi landed a hand on his shoulder. The boy settled down, choosing to cross his arms and pout instead. Naruto. Iruka scratched his chin. It's the rules. Prove yourself with some D ranks, and you will move up. That's how it works. He looked at Kakashi and shrugged. Right, Kakashi. The Jounin squeezed the hand on Naruto's shoulder. They aren't fun for me, either, Naruto. We have to power through. It's time to show Hokage-sama how strong you are. The blonde mumbled under his breath. Kakashi caught a couple swear words he hoped the Sandaime didn't hear. The other 2 kids, who were on each side of Naruto, did hear. They both fought a smile off their faces. He ushered them out the door, thanking the Hokage, and shut the door behind him. As they walked down the street, Sakura practically bounced with each step. Her pink shorts and white shirt were definitely more practical than her previous outfit. She looked comfortable, moved easier, her confidence beginning to rise. She giggled at something Naruto said, the sound light and airy. Kakashi smiled, happy to see her coming into her own. You've been talking about Ino a lot. Naruto said offhandedly. I remember you two were friends when we were younger. Sakura nodded. Well, yeah. Something got in our way, but it's getting better. She glanced at the boys from the corner of her eye. I live with Ino, now. They both looked at her. She didn't elaborate. Surprisingly, neither boy pushed her. We've been staying with Sensei. Naruto's voice was soft as he spoke. Sasuke stiffened. Don't learn anything cool without me. She nudged her shoulder against Naruto, who just smiled back. Sasuke's shoulders loosened. Oh, Sensei. She turned around, walking backward so she could talk to Kakashi. The book you gave me, it's amazing. Senjutsunade is so smart. I want to learn more, learn how to heal like she can. Kakashi patted her on the head. Well, I can see about getting you some scrolls. Better yet, you could talk to the medics at the hospital. They might let you tag along and learn, maybe even train you if you show enough promise. He winked at her. Ino might like to join you. Sakura turned back around, nodding to herself. Yeah. Ino's chakra control was always good, too. We always competed in that. Well, we competed in everything, really. She huffed out a laugh. Not so much now, though. I'm really starting to feel like I've got my friend back. No one said anything for a long time. They let Sakura stay in her thoughts, a smile playing on her face when she thought about her friendship being rekindled. No one talked again until they reached the house where their mission was. An old lady, hunched over and gripping a cane in one hand, stood by an old and worn picket fence. She gave a wrinkly smile as the kids stood before her. Oh my, these genins look younger and younger each year. She laughed to herself. I just need a little help with my garden. Shouldn't take young kids like you very long. A motion of her hand, she showed them the decent-sized garden full of vegetables and flowers. It spanned the length of her fence and wrapped around the back of her house. The kids turned around and looked at Kakashi, matching expressions of disgust on their faces. They had better things to do than weed some old lady's garden. Kakashi knew it, the kids knew it, Sandaime knew it, and this woman knew it. Sadly, they had to do the job. He smiled at them, motioning for them to get going. They marched off through the gate, grumbling the entire time. He'd never seen three more petulant children. It was difficult to hold in his laughter. As Kakashi took a seat on the small bench against the house, he pulled out his book and subtly watched his kids work. Several times they would turn around and glare, wanting him to come and help. Kakashi didn't budge. This might be an alternate timeline, he might be trying to save the world and make his kids better, happier, stronger, but he sure as hell was not weeding a garden. The old lady disappeared in the house shortly after they began working. She didn't reappear until they were done, nearly 3 hours later. Sakura wiped sweat from her forehead, a long line of dark brown dirt marring her forehead. Her long hair stuck to the back of her neck. The lady took one look at her and scoffed, reaching into her pocket and pulling out a hair tie. Girl, come here a moment. Sakura gave her a strange look but walked over. The lady turned her around, Sakura's back to her, and began braiding the long pink hair. Let me give you some advice, sweetie. Long hair is fine for those high society women that sit at the tea shop all day and gossip. But women like you and me, women who do more than get their nails done and go shopping? We need something that will stay out of our face and off our neck. She tied off the braid and clapped her hands together. Sakura turned around to face her, running her hands over the plaited hair. You look beautiful, darling. She glanced over at the boys. Doesn't she, boys? They all nodded their heads. Sakura gave them a sheepish smile. Thanks. Before they left, mission accomplished, the old lady gave them each a bag filled with soft and gooey chocolate chip cookies. Sakura and Naruto had theirs gone before they reached the mission room. Sasuke ate one but complained they were too sweet. Instead, he divided them between his teammates. As two of them happily munched on cookies, Sasuke stuck his hands in the pockets of his dirt-covered shorts. They were all covered in brown and green. Naruto had long since taken his jacket off, it currently tied around his waist. Sakura's white shirt was grass-stained, it would probably never come out entirely. Kakashi had a feeling that Sasuke's shorts and Sakura's shirt would become worn only for training from now on. The kids entered the mission room, Naruto all smiles as he slammed the scroll on the table. Mission complete. Iruka shook his head, a fond smile on his face. Well then, should we do another one? We still have one mission left for dog walking. The look on the kids' faces must have been bad with the way Iruka snorted. Guess not, then. Hokage-sama. Kakashi walked over to where the Sandaime was standing, his pipe balanced between his lips. Could I talk to you? I already know, Kakashi. The old man puffed out smoke. It circled around him, bouncing off of his hat. You've got both of those boys living with you, now. It's odd, for someone who fought me overtaking this team, how quickly you've taken them in. His eyes moved between Sasuke and Naruto, then slid back over to Kakashi. Quite a change in personality. Kakashi knew someone would realize he's not acting like his old self. A lot had changed in his life between getting his kids and losing them. None of this could be told to the Hokage, of course. How could he explain he's a time traveler who is fighting to save the world? He would look insane, be locked away, be kept away from them. That could not happen. This is why I fought you over it, Hokage-sama. I get attached to people. It's a character flaw. Sandaime laughed. Not sure if caring for people is a flaw, Kakashi. Then, in a more serious tone, he went on. I trust you know there are things Naruto cannot be told. Him living with you does not change that. This was a conversation he knew the Hokage would want to have. He'd been against hiding Naruto's heritage from him since day one. Kakashi had thrown himself into Umbu mission after Umbu mission, the more risk the better, to erase the guilt of not being there for Minato-sensei and Kushina's child. It wasn't bad enough he couldn't protect them, but now he couldn't protect their innocent child, either. He's 12, and a genin. I think he could handle it. No, firm and short, the Hokage barked out his answer. Absolutely not. Then when? Kakashi clasped his hands together behind his back to keep from shaking the man. There will be a day when the seal weakens. When it dash. The seal will hold. Minato did it himself, it will hold. Kakashi couldn't tell which of them Sandaime was trying to convince. There will never be a reason for him to know. Kakashi scoffed. You condemn the child to a life of hate and neglect for what reason? He was entering the territory of insubordination very quickly. A quick glance showed the kids still talking to Iruka, not paying attention to their sensei. Were you aware his apartment was broken into? Destroyed. Demon Child wrote on the wall. Sandaime's eyes widened. Naruto isn't stupid. He will figure it out. And when he does, who do you think he'll blame? Kakashi had been a good little lapdog his entire life. He'd never once stepped out of line, never once turned down a mission, failed a mission. He'd done everything by the book. Not anymore. Not when he knows what this path does to his kids. The Sandaime drew his eyes down, his jaw set. I'll let this slip because of your relationship with the Yondaime, but not again. You want to keep this child in your home, then walk the line. He will not know about his parents, nor about his seal. One final glance at Kakashi showed his eyes like steel. That's my final word on the matter, Kakashi. The Hokage walked out the door, his robe dragging behind him. He acted old and feeble, the pipe a constant presence in his mouth. Kakashi always thought it hypocritical of him to look down on Asuma's smoking when he also smoked. But that was Sarutobi's way. He ruled over his village and the shinobi by relying on his reputation. People were afraid of him, afraid to disappoint him. The only person who would stand up to him was Danzo, and that man needed to be stopped, needed to be brutally murdered. Even after everything that man has done, including trying to assassinate Sarutobi, he's still walking around and doing what he wants. It baffles Kakashi to no end. As he stood there, fuming and contemplating what to do next, his kids had finished talking with Iruka and took notice of their sensei's body language. There were shared glances between them and Iruka before they slowly approached him. Sensei. Sakura reached out, tentatively, and tugged on his sleeve. Are you okay? His anger was practically palpable, but, as he looked at his kids, he tried to calm down. This wasn't their fault. They didn't cause the pain in their lives, the struggle and anger and horrible situations they have dealt with. Sakura with all of her insecurities and overbearing parents. Sasuke with the death of his clan and the knowledge that his own brother did it. Naruto with the Kyuubi and all the lies that have surrounded his short life. Nothing has been fair for any of his kids. They were all born with the odds stacked against them. I'm fine. Kakashi forced a smile on his face. I think we should forego any other missions today. Let's train, what do you say? All three of them nodded, still looking at Kakashi as if he would fall over at any moment. Who knows, he might. He sure felt like it. But first, lunch. Sakura's pick. Naruto immediately began whispering ramen in her ear. His version of a whisper could still be heard from across the room. With arms crossed, Sasuke gave his best unimpressed look as he watched Naruto practically dance in place, still trying to make up Sakura's mind on his own. Sushi. She finally answered. Naruto groaned. But, let's go to the one by Ichiraku so Naruto can have his damn ramen. The boy instantly went from depressed to elated. Kakashi smiled and patted his head. Okay, let's go. The three left before him. Kakashi could hear their voices echoing down the hallway. Before he could leave, however, Iruka grabbed his arm. The look on Iruka's face was pure concern. Kakashi, I heard part of your conversation with Hokage-sama. Remember, I teach children for a living, I'm good at multitasking. We need to talk, don't we? This wasn't his ideal place to have a conversation about Naruto, but no one rivaled his love for that kid other than Iruka. Kakashi shrugged. It never occurred to him to include Iruka in his effort to help Naruto. It might not be so bad to let the teacher know, at least about what Naruto has basically figured out on his own. Later. Iruka nodded, taking that for an answer, before letting go of Kakashi's arm. He joined his kids in the hallway, walking them to lunch and attempting to join in on their contagious happiness. Tucked into the Ika Ika book, Kakashi had the training itinerary all folded up. As the three kids ran through the forest, being chased by all of his dog summons in an attempt to successfully hide and not be found, Kakashi unfolded it and looked the paper over. His careful handwriting in black ink laid out all of his plans. First of all, he was working on their stamina while simultaneously teaching them stealth and evasion. It would shock him if any of his kids could hide from his dogs, quite honestly. His theory held true when, an hour later, Kakashi watched as Baisuke dragged Naruto out of the forest by his pant leg. They went into the forest covered in dirt from their mission. Now Naruto's outfit looked entirely brown and covered in clumps of mud. He was cursing as he clawed at the ground. Once in front of Kakashi, Baisuke dropped Naruto's pant leg and looked up, proud of his accomplishment. Good boy, Baisuke. He dug a treat out of his pack for the dog. Naruto, I want you to sit here and think about what you did wrong. The boy sat up against the training post, arms crossed and pouting. A clump of mud fell from his hair down onto his knee. 20 minutes later Inuroshi nudged Sakura out of the forest with his nose, the girl having a dejected look on her face. She flopped down next to Naruto, her clothes equally covered in mud. You too, huh? Naruto nodded, still pouting. This isn't fair. They can smell us. Kakashi laughed. Enemy ninja won't play fair, Sakura. You have to outsmart them. He tapped his temple. Outthink. After patting Uroshi on the head, he handed the dog a treat. Good dog. He sat there, watching the two kids talk about where they went wrong. Sakura was blaming the dog's scent of smell, and Naruto was blaming Baisuke for singling him out. Another half an hour passed before Bull and Shiba exited the forest, each carrying one of Sasuke's arm coverings in their mouths. Pakun trotted out after. Behind them, Akino, Bahei, and Guriko came out of the forest, each having a separate piece of clothing in their mouths, his shirt, his headband, and one sandal. Sakura and Naruto looked horrified as they took in what was happening. Pakun sat down beside Naruto, looking angry. The kid took off his clothes. Scattered them around the forest. He had all of us chasing ghosts. He scratched behind his ear. Damn brat. If possible, He frowned even more. So, he's still out there. Sakura looked up at Kakashi. Missing half of his clothes. Kakashi laughed. Smart kid. Threw them off his trail quickly. He turned back to his dogs. Why did you quit looking? He hit the river, Pakun growled out. We lost his scent. Can we pee on these clothes? Yes. Naruto yelled. That's a great idea. He stood up and began gathering all of the clothes in a pile, motioning for the dogs to line up. Kakashi grabbed him by his collar and pushed him back against the training post. No, Naruto. No one is peeing on Sasuke's clothes. Kakashi shook his head. I can't believe I said that sentence today. Sakura giggled. Well, we did say 3 hours, right? We will just wait for him to come to us. You guys can go if you want to. He motioned toward the dogs, who all barked at him before they disappeared. All except Pakun. I'm waiting. I want to bite him. Kakashi just shrugged. Well, while we wait, let's talk. He sat, cross-legged, in front of the kids. We are going to start ninjutsu training tomorrow after our mission. You have all worked hard on your taijutsu this past week, both of you upping your skill level. I also want to add to your knowledge of ninjutsu. I want you to have a library worth to choose from. The two were wide-eyed as they listened to him. Mention training them, giving them a new skill, and he had their undivided attention. Kakashi could honestly say he missed these days. If there's anything you've seen done you want to try, let me know. I'll see what I can do. With his kids in deep thought, contemplating on the limited ninjutsu they'd seen, he flared out his senses for Sasuke. The boy was heading back towards them, apparently having figured out the dogs weren't after him anymore. Pakun sniffed the air and growled, also sensing the boy. It would be a while before Sasuke made his way to the training field, so Kakashi let his mind wander. He thought back to his conversation with the Hokage, trying to keep the anger low and undetected. Reaching into his pack, he pulled out the Ika Ika book and slipped the scrap of paper he'd written on from between the pages. Mainly just staring at the paper instead of reading it, Kakashi got lost in his head. Sandaime had infuriated him, shook him to the core. The blatant disregard for Naruto's well-being felt like it was gutting him. He tried to remind himself that Sarutobi didn't live long enough to see the seal weaken. That the man didn't know how wrong he actually was, how wrong he already was. Naruto was already talking to the Kyuubi, it wouldn't be long before the boy figures out how to befriend him. It was Naruto's greatest skill, talking to people until they're friends. He fought for everything, the poor kid, and fought hard. Not anymore. Damn brat. Kakashi heard Pakun growl, snapping him out of his thoughts. He snapped the book shut and slid it back in his pack. He heard Sasuke yelp, looking up to see Pakun hanging off his bare ankle. Pakun, let him alone. Kakashi half-chided. Sasuke shook his ankle until Pakun finally let go. You got your revenge, now go home. The pug shot him a disapproving look before disappearing. Sasuke, who was standing on one foot while he rubbed the ankle with bite marks, frowned. Clever, Sasuke. Hiding your clothes around to throw off their scent was a good idea. He pointed toward the clothes in a pile. Get dressed, kiddo. You did good. Sasuke practically preened while picking up his clothes and redressing. Sakura tried hard not to make it obvious she was watching him getting dressed, her mind cataloging it to get the best reaction from Ino later. Oh, she was going to enjoy this. Kakashi took the long way home, directing the boys between alleyways and around buildings until they arrived at the clothing shop. He put a hand on Naruto's back, gently coaxing the boy into the building. You need some clothes, Naruto. You can't wear the same outfit every day. We will pick some outfits out for now, then we can come back for more later. Frozen, Naruto refused to move. He remembered this place, the owner a burly man with broad shoulders and an angry face. He remembered the way the man chased him out of the store, not even allowing him to look. He remembered the way the man's hands felt as they pushed him, hard, onto the street. And no, not here. Naruto tried to step back. The shop owner stepped around one of the shelves, an inventory list in his hands. As soon as he saw Naruto, the man snarled. Get the fuck out of my store, demon. The man took a step forward and Naruto nearly folded in on himself, backing up and running right into Sasuke. Kakashi put himself between Naruto and the man, sliding his headband up and letting his Sharingan spin and glow. Kakashi stood still, not moving as the man barreled toward him. He stopped, face to face, and glared Kakashi down. "Lay a hand on him and I'll break every bone in your body." The man just glared harder. "Don't test me. I will win." The man snorted. "You can't touch me, Hatake. I know the rules. Shinobi cannot attack civilians. Unless they laid a hand on the shinobi first." Kakashi finished. "And, as far as I saw, you were planning to lay a hand on Naruto." He glanced over his shoulder. "Kid, do you feel threatened?" Hiding behind Sasuke's shoulder, Naruto nodded. "Good enough for me." He pulled his arm back, fist at the ready when the man's eyes went wide. With the speed a man his size shouldn't have, he jumped back and slammed his door shut. Kakashi growled, sending his fist through the man's door. Once he pulled his hand back, he turned around to face the boys. Sasuke's eyes were wide as they flickered between his sensei and the hole in the door. Naruto, still peeking from behind Sasuke's shoulder, just stared at him. "Fuck him." Kakashi hiked a thumb toward the building. "We'll get you clothes somewhere else." As Kakashi walked down the street, willing himself to calm down, the two boys just looked at each other before jogging to catch up. They were silent until Kakashi stopped in front of another clothing store, one that catered to shinobi. Motioning for the boys to stay where they were, he entered the shop on his own. "Hatake-san." The young lady behind the counter greeted him as soon as he came into view. "How can I help you today?" She was counting out the yards of fabric on the bolt, hands quickly moving even as she's not looking at it, not actively counting. It just showed how long she'd been doing this for her to be this skilled this young. He placed his hands on the counter, the knuckles of his right hand ripped up and bleeding. "My student needs clothes. Badly. If I bring him in here, will you have a problem with it?" He tilted his head toward the door. "The boy in dirty orange." She leaned to the side to see around Kakashi, taking in the kid he was talking about. "Oh, is that the boy?" "Yeah, bring him in." She shook her head. "People in this town are stupid. They're all sheep who just follow whoever yells the loudest. The kid has never done anything to me, so I have no reason to turn him away." Kakashi practically dropped in relief. He turned around and motioned for the boys to come inside. Naruto was still hiding behind Sasuke. "Naruto, take a look around. Find anything you like, let me know." He tried to keep the frustration out of his voice. None of this was Naruto's fault. This tailor was right, it was all the older generation running their mouths. No commenting about who's paying for it, either. "Just look." Naruto nodded. His hand wrapped around Sasuke's wrist and wouldn't let go. For once, Sasuke didn't argue with him, just let himself be dragged along. 20 minutes later they had clothes in their hands and laid them on the counter. Kakashi shuffled through it and deemed it good enough for now. "Honey." She leaned over the counter to better see Naruto. "You are welcome in here whenever you want, okay?" Naruto's mouth dropped open. "You never tried to come in here, did you?" "Not since you've been here." "Oh." The woman shook her head. "The previous owner was my uncle." "Yeah, if you came in then, well, it's different now." Once the clothes were paid for and bagged, Kakashi led the boys home. His hand was aching where his knuckles were torn. The bleeding had stopped, coagulated, and scabbed over. Everyone was quiet, save for the bags crinkling as they walked. As soon as they entered the apartment, Kakashi stole away to the bathroom, gripping the counter and leaning his head forward. He's already in trouble with Sandaime. If the shop owner tattles on him. "Sensei." Naruto's small voice floated under the door. I'm sorry." "Oh no." Kakashi whipped the door open. He dropped to his knees and grabbed Naruto's shoulders. "No, Naruto. None of this is your fault. Absolutely nothing that happened was your fault. I am sorry. I'm sorry that I never thought to ask you where you felt comfortable going. I'm sorry that I put you through that. I'm sorry that you were scared." He dropped his head, trying to rein in his emotions. So much had happened that day, Kakashi was losing his grip on his sanity. I don't want you to ever feel like that again. I want you to feel safe with me, with us. Understand? Naruto nodded. She offered to tailor some clothes for you, which will help you out. Nothing you got today was orange, so I'll make sure she makes you something in your wild color palette. Naruto nodded. I don't mind if it's not. I wore orange because then people noticed me. But I've got you guys and Iruka-sensei now. I'm noticed now. Thankful for his Umbu training, Kakashi held his emotions back until the boys ate leftovers and crawled into bed. Naruto chose the clothes Kakashi gave him as his nightwear. It made the Jounin feel something warm inside. Kakashi went to take a shower, cranking up the heat until his skin turned red. He stood there, one hand bracing him against the wall, and let the emotions out. Everything he'd been holding back, everything that has happened to him, clawing inside him. The previous timeline where he couldn't save anyone, couldn't protect anyone, destroyed lives and failed so many. The battlefield as he watched comrade after comrade die, Guy, Inoichi, Shikaku, Lady Tsunade, Shizune, the so-called Rookie 9, all broken and bloody and dead. His father, laying in a pool of blood, dead by his own hand. Obito lying crushed under a rock, his dying voice and bloody eye socket seared into his mind with the Sharingan, a power he didn't earn, wasn't supposed to have. Rin, the shock and pain on her face as his hand, sparking and chirping with the jutsu of his own creation, was clean through her chest. For the first time in a long time, Kakashi cried. Chapter 9, What do you want to be? There was food on the table when Sakura got out of the shower. It took her a while to get the dirt, grass stains, and mud out of her hair and off her skin. She felt sore and achy all over, proof that she'd worked hard that day. In fresh and clean clothes, smelling of lavender from Ino's body wash, she sat down at the table. Ino was chatting about her day, about training with her team, complaining that the other two were so lazy. It was so homey that Sakura soaked it all in like a sponge. She'd never been happier than when she began living with the Yamanakas. Sakura. Inoichi scooped up some salad for himself. What did you do today? We had our first mission today. It was weeding a garden, which wasn't fun. But the woman baked us cookies. They were yummy. Sakura smiled, remembering the sweet taste. After that, we trained. We had to hide from Sensei's 9 dogs in the forest. The only one who actually managed it was Sasuke. Naruto got caught first. Inoichi laughed. I wish Asuma pushed Ino's team as hard as Kakashi's pushing you 3. I always knew if Kakashi settled down a little he'd be a great teacher. He nodded to himself. He cares about people deeply. He told me I should think of becoming a medic like Senjutsunade. Inoichi scratched his chin. It would be wonderful to have another medic of her caliber in Konoha. How was your chakra control in the academy? Almost perfect. Ino's voice sounded patronizing, but the smirk on her face showed otherwise. Trust me, we heard it every day. Again, Inoichi laughed. Sakura stuck her tongue out. Yours was up there, too, Ino. I only beat you by 3 points, remember? Rub it in, Sakura. You were always better than me, we know. Ino slams her fork down on the plate. She was always neck and neck with Sakura, but always a tiny bit behind. If they both aced a test, Sakura would finish seconds ahead of her. If they both threw kunao, Sakura's were slightly closer to the bullseye. No matter what, she was always ahead. Sensing a storm brewing behind his daughter's eyes, he tried to placate her. I don't think that's what she meant, Inoichi stated. You're saying her chakra control is almost perfect and you, Ino, are only 3 points away. Which means yours is close to perfect, too. It was a compliment, kiddo. When the realization hit Ino, and the two girls smiled at each other, Inoichi let out a breath. That was an argument in the making. 2 preteen girls under one roof were going to be the death of him. After dinner was over, and the girls had washed the dishes, Inoichi sent them both to bed. Sakura was still staying in Ino's room, seeing as how no one had the time to clean out the spare. Inoichi's job was stressful enough, add in being a single father, to 2 girls, now, and the man was tired. If his daughter wasn't complaining, and Sakura wasn't complaining, and the bed was big enough for them to each get a decent night's sleep, then who was he to argue? Ino was laying on the bed, on her stomach, feet kicking in the air, as she opened the book Sakura had been reading. Senjutsunade, from what Ino had heard, was a famous Sunin, trained by Sandaime. She was known as the greatest medic in history, being able to save people other medics thought impossible. Sakura had finished the book twice now, reading it late into the night while Ino decodes the newest scrolls her dad brought home. Tonight, however, Ino had no new scroll to decode. Sakura. Ino looked up at the pink-haired girl who was currently digging in her bag. Can I read your book? Sakura glanced up to see which book Ino was talking about. Yeah, of course. If you're interested, we could go see if they will train us at the hospital. Sensei brought it up today. Ino shrugged, a non-committal look on her face. I think I'm going to go ask tomorrow before training. She watched as Ino read down the page. Ino was beautiful, Sakura could admit that willingly. Her blonde hair and bright eyes drew Sakura in at a young age. She was loud, brash, and fiercely protective. When she was little, when grown-up things didn't matter and sexuality wasn't in her vocabulary, Sakura had a crush on her. When they would play or run together, Ino always grabbed her hand. When Sakura would fall down, get picked on, cried, Ino would brush a piece of hair off her face and wipe the tears. Every touch made Sakura feel warm and cozy. As her long, blonde eyelashes moved as Ino blinked, Sakura felt that warm feeling rush over her again. Sakura did what she was supposed to do back then. Find a boy, have a crush, and act like a girl. Exactly what her mother had taught her, what the other girls did. In her heart of hearts, Sakura knew it was never about Sasuke. It was about the rivalry, the drama, the ability to say she won a prize she didn't even want. Just like the keychains, Sasuke was a status symbol. Maybe it wasn't about being first, being the winner, being the one to hold the prize. Maybe it was about being happy. And, as she sat on the floor in front of Ino's bed, looking up at the girl to whom Sakura always looked up to, wanted to be like, she could admit she was happy. No expectations, no passive-aggressive comments, or half-hidden guilt trips. Just people who accepted her as she was. Sakura reached her hand out, slowly tucking a strand of Ino's hair behind her ear. Come with me. To the hospital. I know you can do it. Their eyes met over the edge of the book. Yeah? I mean, yeah, sure. Her eyes flickered back to the book before meeting Sakura's again. I forgot to tell you. You looked really pretty with your hair pulled back like that. Sakura blushed. I'll help you do it again tomorrow if you want. Thank you, Ino. There was something crinkling, something gnawing at his ears and waking him up. Sasuke cracked his eyes open. The futon beside him was empty, blanket and pillow in disarray. Pushing himself up on his elbows, Sasuke peered around the room. Naruto, with his gray sweatpants and too big shirt, was leaning over one of the bags, shuffling through the clothes. Beside him were 3 piles, all neatly folded. Idiot, what are you doing? Sasuke rubbed at his eyes with one hand, pushing himself into a sitting position with the other. The clock on Kakashi's counter showed it was way too early to be awake. The blonde turned to look at him, hands full of a shirt. I'm trying to keep all my clothes tidy. I don't want to take up too much room. Dropping the shirt, Naruto motioned around the apartment. I just don't want to be a problem. Running a hand through his messy hair, Sasuke looked at Naruto. The boy looked shaken, eyes dark as if he hadn't slept all night. He'd heard Naruto apologize last night for something that wasn't his fault. He'd heard how broken and small the boy sounded, the way Naruto folded in on himself. The man at the clothing store, a man Sasuke had actually bought things from before, sickened him. The way he talked to Naruto, about Naruto, set his teeth on edge. So what if Naruto was a Jinchuriki? That didn't make him the demon. If these people knew who his father is, knew he was a Hokage's son, would they still treat him like that? As Naruto's folding became more meticulous, more erratic, Sasuke pushed himself on his knees and slid himself over to him. Kakashi wouldn't let us stay here if it was a problem. Naruto's hands were shaking. Sasuke feared another panic attack was imminent. Idiot, look at me. Sasuke slid in front of Naruto, knocking the bag to the side, and grabbing the blonde's face. Look at me. When slightly wide, erratic, blue eyes focused on him, Sasuke kept his gaze. Do you get these a lot? Panic attacks like this. Blue eyes widened further. So, yes, then. Kakashi told you last night, and I'll tell you now. You have nothing to be sorry about. It's not your fault this village is full of people who fear what they don't understand. Just, look, focus on us, the team. We don't care what you are or what's sealed inside you. You're the same moron you always were to us. Sakura might not know yet, but she won't care, either. You were always different. Naruto's shaking voice was barely a whisper. Sasuke let go of his face. You never acted like you were afraid of me. Shikamaru and Koji always played with me. Kiba did, too, but just because it made his mom mad. Everyone else acted like they were afraid of me. You didn't. Honestly, Sasuke never played with anybody from the academy. Even before the massacre, Sasuke always kept to himself, more wrapped up in what his brother was doing than wanting to be with kids his own age. But, thinking back, his mother never once told him to stay away from Naruto. I know the adults told them not to play with you. My mom never told me that. She always told me to make my own decision on who my friends are. Naruto nodded, feigning like he understood. Does what happened yesterday, does that happen a lot? He sighed before scratching at his head. Yeah. A lot more when I was younger. Now I just know where not to go. He huffed out a laugh. It figures Sensei would pick the one place I can't go, right? There was a long pause before Naruto spoke again. Are we friends? It was a jolt, the words hitting him hard. Were they friends? They'd been rivals for years, practically enemies at times. Sasuke still remembers sparring with Naruto in the academy after the massacre, when his emotions were at the highest, when his nightmares never gave him a moment's rest, when he was just angry. He remembers how he took it all out on Naruto, making the boy bleed into the dirt, his hands smudged with red. It was different now. Feigned indifference and childish name-calling are what they have resorted to. The rivalry was still there, would always be there. It was as ingrained in them as their own identities. Since living together, they'd found a whole new understanding. So. Yeah, Naruto. We're friends. After 2 pointless missions and a late lunch, Team 7 and Team 10 met in front of the hospital. Asuma smiled as the other team came into view, dropping the butt of his cigarette and grinding it into the ground with his sandal. Hey, Kakashi. Long time no see. Asuma was a friendly man. A little wild in his younger years, but always kind. He and Kakashi had instantly taken as friends when they'd met, even if Kakashi was hard to become friends with at the time. Guess our girls have decided on a path, then. Kakashi laughed, patting Sakura on the head. I think they've chosen well. He eyed the two boys on Asuma's team. Did you two choose a path? Shikamaru leveled him with a disinterested look that Kakashi had seen on Shikaku's face many times. Koji shrugged, opening a new bag of chips. The last time Kakashi had seen the two of them, they were dying on the battlefield. Koji had overexerted himself to the point he was nothing but skin and bones, muscles burned away with the calories he'd consumed without any food to supplement them. Covered in dirt and blood, Shikamaru used the last of his strength to drag Ino behind a rock before collapsing on top of her, saving the dying girl from being crushed under a meteor. Now, with them fresh-faced standing in front of him, Kakashi had an urge to protect these kids as much as his own. You know, Asuma, while our girls have teamed up to study medicine, our boys can get some training in together. Would do them good to challenge someone not on their team. He ignored Koji's frightened face and the scowl on Shikamaru's. Instead, he focused on Asuma and the clear joy written there. Asuma clapped Shikamaru on the back, sending the boy lurching forward. I think that is a great idea. What do you think, boys? It said a lot that Asuma didn't even look at their faces before declaring they would follow Team 7. Asuma already knew what their expressions would say. The last time the four boys had sparred, it had been in the academy. It was immediately evident to both Koji and Shikamaru that Naruto wasn't the same blonde they knew then. When Naruto took his fighting stance, standing opposite Shikamaru on the field, the genius thought he actually knew Naruto's first move. He was wrong. He miscalculated how much the blonde could pick up from Sasuke. Instead of Naruto's normal brute force approach, which would have easily put him in Shikamaru's shadows, he dodged to the side, flipping over on his hands and using his feet to knock Shikamaru to the ground. Asuma looked surprised, his eyes wide with awe. Taught him well, did you? Nope. Kakashi popped the word. Sasuke taught him. Taught Sakura, too. As Shikamaru sat on the ground, shaking his head at how wrong he was, how bad he miscalculated, Naruto stood in front of him with his hand extended. Wanna go again? Letting Naruto help him stand, Shikamaru nodded. Cool. This time, Shikamaru readied his stance and read the field. If Naruto learned from Sasuke, as Kakashi just alluded to, then he should be planning more for fighting Sasuke, which was scary. Shikamaru never claimed to be the best in taijutsu. He was an expert in dodging, however. Staying out of the action was more his family trait. A well-placed dodge and equally well-placed hit would be his best bet. Keeping Naruto moving would give him his best shot. He managed to keep Naruto moving for a whole 3 minutes before the blonde leveled him with a kick that knocked the wind out of him. They had been a team for, what, a week and a half? How had Naruto gotten so good so quickly? He managed to block the next attack, sending Naruto skidding backward. The blonde glanced at Sasuke, who just tilted his head. Oh. So they communicate now? When did that happen? First Ino doesn't call Sakura names anymore, nor call her a rival, and now Naruto and Sasuke are able to read each other? Did he fall into another dimension? It wasn't long before Shikamaru just gave up. He threw his hands up and walked off toward Asuma. I'm done. I can't beat him, this is pointless. Naruto looked at Shikamaru and Asuma and shrugged. You never liked to spar in the academy either. Why not? Too much work. He put his hands behind his head and looked up at the clouds. Taijutsu is a drag. Asuma scoffed at him. If you don't want to fight, then why become a ninja? How are you supposed to protect people if you just run away all the time? Naruto had his head tilted to the side. They were honest questions, not said with malice at all. Naruto was honestly curious. Koji looked between the blonde and Shikamaru, clearly waiting for him to answer the question, as did Asuma. Shikamaru, for once, didn't really have an answer. He became a ninja because he was expected to. It's what the Nara clan did. They specialized in stealth, incapacitation, interrogation. They were the brains for all the brawn in the village. Besides that, as the next Inoshikacho formation, it was like his destiny was just laid out for him. Something Naruto said rang true, made him think. Missions consisted of him protecting someone or something. Protecting meant staying there, fighting, and not backing down. Running away wouldn't help him at all. Shikamaru looked over at Koji, who was much like him, just doing what his family expected of him. But Koji was too kind, too gentle. He would never be able to hurt someone, no matter how much of an enemy they were. It was too present in their sparring sessions when Koji refused to actually hit anyone. Naruto was still looking at him as if Shikamaru was a puzzle he couldn't find all the pieces to. I don't know, Naruto. Never really thought about it that way. Give me a rest and we'll try again, deal? Naruto immediately flashed him a bright, blinding smile and a thumbs up. When Naruto walked back over to Kakashi, Koji blanched. He looked at Sasuke, always the top in taijutsu, always able to take anyone on and win, who even gave the teachers a run for their money, and realized he was no match. Slowly, Koji backed away. He didn't get far before Asuma clamped a hand on his shoulder. A gentle push sent Koji stumbling forward, his bag of chips falling on the ground. The boy, with wide eyes and shaking legs, looked at Sasuke. His only thought was that Sasuke was going to kill him. Koji glanced back at Shikamaru, a silent plea for help, before swallowing hard and facing his demise. For Sasuke's credit, he went slow and hit easy. There were many opportunities Sasuke could have taken, opportunities that would have put Koji on the ground, hard. But he didn't take them. Instead, he let the boy stumble without capitalizing on it. When it dawned on Sasuke what he was doing, that he was being weak in front of an opponent, letting them hit him, he almost froze. Barely dodging a hit to the jaw, Sasuke ducked down and knocked Koji's hand away, causing him to stumble. Instinct told Sasuke to swipe Koji's legs out from under him. As the boy hit the ground, Sasuke jumped up, a fist aiming straight at Koji's face. The eyes were so wide they looked ready to roll out of the socket. A voice in the back of his head kept telling him to hit Koji, show him what he's doing wrong by force. But the fear in those wide eyes kept Sasuke's hand still. Would Itachi have hit him? Would Itachi have shown mercy? Does Sasuke want to be like Itachi, whether he's good or bad or whatever was going on? No. He stood, using the hand that was previously in a fist to help Koji up. The boy looked relieved. He smiled. Sasuke just nodded. I know I'm not very good. Koji looked down at the ground. I'm not good at anything. There was dirt on his elbows and knees, a faint bruise starting on one shin. Asuma's eyes were soft as he watched his student. It hit Sasuke how much he and Sakura were alike. Both so filled with insecurities they can't see their own worth. Taking a moment to gather his thoughts, put them in order in his head, Sasuke looked up. You, Koji, you're not terrible. Sakura, she's working on the same issues. Being afraid to hit someone, it's not going to help you in a real fight. You won't ever win just using defense. Kakashi constantly said Sasuke was good at training. But he knew talking was not a skill he had. Instead, he glanced over his shoulder, eyes pleading for help. Sasuke's right, Koji. Asuma came into the conversation, rescuing Sasuke. You're a kind and gentle kid. That, however, doesn't mean there is nothing you're good at. You've been training for less than 2 weeks. Give it time, kid. Koji nodded but didn't look comforted at all. He walked toward Shikamaru, who gave him a small smile. Naruto and Sasuke were right, they had a lot of work to do if they expected to protect anyone. The moon shone brightly through the window. Sasuke could feel the cool night air against the glass as he sat, curled up on the windowsill. His mind was spinning, a flurry of thoughts bouncing back and forth. They kept him awake, kept him staring at the ceiling begging for sleep. Naruto snored on, curled in a ball and hugging his pillow. Holding the picture of Kakashi's genin team in his hands, he stared down at the Uchiha in the picture, the reason his sensei had the Sharingan at all. He died way before the massacre, before Itachi was born. If he were there, would he have stopped it? Could he be strong enough to take on Itachi? Sasuke sighed, looking back up at the moon. Today, sparring with Koji caused something to shift inside him. If he would have been sparring Naruto, there wouldn't have been any holding back and pulling his punches. It was a normal occurrence for one or both of them to be bleeding after sparring. But he was fighting a scared kid with academy-level skills. He fought with the same ferocity as a teddy bear. It would have been easy to defeat Koji, to make him bleed, to leave him broken, but he didn't. Sasuke was stopped just by seeing fear in Koji's eyes. Itachi wouldn't have stopped. Itachi would have taken the win, taken what was rightfully his. But Sasuke is not Itachi. He didn't murder his entire clan, leave his baby brother alive and alone and broken, forced to revisit the deaths over and over and over. No, Sasuke wasn't his brother. A shadow crossed the room, stepping in front of him. Even in the darkness, Naruto's blue eyes shone like they were a light source all their own. He looked concerned, eyes flickering all over Sasuke, trying to figure out what was wrong. Why are you awake? Sasuke snorted. Couldn't sleep. He sat the picture down on the windowsill beside his leg. Too much on my mind, I guess. Shrugging, he tried to look nonchalant. Naruto wasn't buying it. Wanna talk about it? The pajama pants Sasuke had on were fraying at the hem. Naruto focused on it, picking at the string by Sasuke's ankle. It helped me that night I couldn't sleep. Blue eyes flickered up to Sasuke's face before returning to the string. Or I could make you some tea. Sasuke watched as Naruto pulled the string taut before letting it bounce back. He could tell Naruto, right? Maybe Naruto could help him piece the thoughts in his head together, make them make sense. Maybe he could give Sasuke some alternate reason the massacre happened at all. No, that was stupid. Why would Naruto know why Taka did what he did? Sasuke shook his head, scoffing at his own thought trail. The string on his pajamas bounced back again, Naruto's fingernails reflecting the moonlight as he reached to pick it up again. Sasuke's eyes trailed from the fingernails and up the arm, where the sleeves were too long, almost touching his elbows. He looked so small in those clothes, so much younger than he was. Like a child playing dress-up in their father's clothes. But Naruto never got to do that, did he? He didn't get to grow up with his father. The Kyuubi took that away from him. Dark eyes flickered to Naruto's face. Naruto had trusted him with the knowledge of Kyuubi, how it resided within him, how he could talk to him, how it was his own parents that put him there. He'd trusted Sasuke with the knowledge that was practically illegal for him to know, thanks to the Sandame's law. He put off telling Sasuke because he was afraid of being rejected, not because he didn't trust Sasuke. Meeting Naruto's eyes again, Sasuke steeled himself. He could tell Naruto. Naruto would understand, wouldn't judge him, wouldn't tell him he's crazy. He could trust Naruto. I don't want to be like my brother. I don't want to become what he told me to be. Sasuke's voice was so small in the darkness. He continued to watch as Naruto picked at the string on his pajamas. There was a long pause, then Naruto pulled the string so hard it snapped. Then don't. It was said so simply, so easily. Sasuke's eyes met Naruto's and just stared. What do you want to be? Now there's a question Sasuke had never asked himself. What does he want to be? Thoughts raced through his head: avenger, clan leader, powerful, strong, loved, cared about, but, most of all, the one thing he missed being the most. Happy. Chapter 10, Digging Deep, Finding Roots. Kakashi had officially been a Jounin sensei for a full month. The calendar on his wall was a steady countdown until the Land of Waves mission, where Tajuna would lie his way into a C-rank and subject Kakashi's genin to an S-rank ninja and his ice-wielding partner. He had, maybe, a week, if not less, before that mission. Were his kids ready? Yes. He'd trained them well, gave them tools they didn't have before. With a stack of Fuinjutsu books, Naruto had the beginnings of his clan's power. He was already a menace, making paper smoke bombs strong enough to cause an entire street to evacuate. One particular tea shop was out of business for over a week, the smoke tainting all of their jasmine tea leaves. It was the weirdest thing how the smoke wafted down the street and specifically concentrated onto this one particular building. The Sandame asked around, the shop owner has complained directly to him, but no one seemed to know anything. There were, however, 3 genins who hid smirks every time they passed that street. That's not even to mention the hole in the forest outside of the village, courtesy of a paper firebomb so dense it shook the ground and leveled the trees in a 200-foot circle. On the training field, Naruto took to wind nature like a bird to the sky. That is, it took him falling on his face a few times before he took off. Kakashi had held firm on his chakra control training, not allowing the kid to go a day without at least an hour of work. All that hard work paid off when Naruto created a wind vortex that ripped a cement post out of the ground and impaled it clean through a giant oak tree. Sakura squealed and clapped, bouncing in place as the 4 of them took in the tree. Kakashi drew a face on the end of the pole and left it there. As Kakashi thought, Sakura was an earth element. Her secondary, however, was water. The girl worked hard, daily shifts at the hospital with Ino after missions and training. Sometimes the girl looked so tired in the mornings, Kakashi would let her do meditation for chakra reserves just to give her a break. If she happened to fall asleep, Kakashi said nothing. All the training with Sasuke had paid off, he really was an excellent teacher. Sakura's self-confidence skyrocketed, whether that was from being away from her parents, Ino's influence, or her newly developed skills in taijutsu, he didn't know. But she was faster, more sure of herself. She hit with a force a girl her size shouldn't have. The day she got a hit on Sasuke, knocking him across the training field and into a tree, Kakashi was immensely proud of her. So was Sasuke, who stood up and shook off the bark clinging to his clothes. He praised her, in his stunted way, and patted her on the shoulder. Sakura beamed as though Sasuke had given her a trophy. Her chakra control aided her in learning every earth and water jutsu she came in contact with. Her earth wall was a force to be reckoned with. Even Kakashi's Reikiri couldn't penetrate the entire way through it. The medics promised Sakura and Ino training, and they did provide. The day she healed a cut on Sasuke's hand was the day the boys saw her set excuse for a victory dance. Naruto laughed so hard he was clutching his stomach and rolling on the ground. Sasuke smirked, rolling his eyes, and waved her off. Kakashi stood off to the side, smiling under his mask. The girl was well on her way to becoming the next Tsunade. He couldn't wait for the day she punched an earthquake into existence. Just a little longer. Sasuke was a force all his own. Obviously, the boy tested for fire, but lightning came as a surprise to Sasuke. Eager to learn, Kakashi handed him fire and lightning scrolls. His fireball and phoenix flower became stronger, hotter. It burned through the trees like kindling. Lightning from his hands charged the air around them, sending hair standing on end. Sasuke had a knack for changing his chakra affinity easily. It came from learning the fireball at such a young age, learning how to mold his chakra from the inside. There was no jutsu that confounded the kid. Something Kakashi had never done in the previous timeline, he told all of his kids how proud he was. He lavished it on Sasuke a little more. Shoulder squeeze, hair ruffles, pats on the back, and, more importantly, with words. The kid would actually blush and look away when Kakashi would tell him he was proud. He wondered, not for the first time, if Sasuke's father had ever said those words to him. Since the spar with Team 10, Sasuke had been working with Koji in the evenings. Just as he did with Sakura, he slowly built up the boy's confidence. What was once a shy, timid boy was slowly coming into his own. He wasn't there yet, but a few more weeks of just him and Sasuke, and the boy would be a fierce competitor. Sasuke wanted to unlock his Sharingan, asking Kakashi a million questions regarding what he knew about it. Sadly, there wasn't much in writing anymore, a lot of it either stolen or purged. There was the Naka Shrine, and the texts are hidden within, but Sasuke couldn't go there. He wasn't ready to try to enter the district again. Kakashi wasn't pushing him, he knew all too well what entering a place full of ghosts could do to a person. The boy had enough nightmares, he didn't need more. Kakashi had told him not to rush it. That intense emotion unlocks the Jujutsu. It's not something to be rushed. Instead, Kakashi satiated Sasuke by slowly teaching him the techniques for the Reikiri. He knew what Sasuke was capable of, what he evolved the Reikiri to be under his rigorous training. If he started earlier, trained younger, how much more could he do? Kakashi had left Sasuke and Naruto home alone. They had strict instructions: don't burn the apartment down, no trying paper bombs indoors, eat something healthy for dinner and practice their chakra control exercises. He sent out a silent prayer that the two would at least listen to the first couple of rules. This trip was for Naruto. Being the previous commander of the Anbu, Kakashi had perks. Many of the Anbu were still loyal to him, still called him senpai. It used to make him uncomfortable. He was younger than some of the ninja he commanded. It made him feel strange having someone 10 years his senior call him senpai. However, after living one full lifetime of guilt and pain, Kakashi decided to abuse his power today. Although, if it was for a good cause, is it still considered abusing his power? The hidden archive was held underground, under the Hokage Tower. Guarded by Anbu, the only way to get in was with express permission from the Hokage himself. However, if you had worked as commander of the Anbu, then you knew the guard rotations. You also knew that the night guards weren't nearly as alert as the daytime guards. And, Kakashi was confident enough to pat himself on the back, he was damn good at stealth. Cloaking his chakra as best he could, Kakashi hid in a dark corner, behind a pile of papers. He'd roamed these halls before, he knew the layout better than most. There was an air vent. It led directly into the archive, hidden low in the wall about 50 feet ahead of him. Shift change would be soon. He would have exactly 30 seconds to open the vent, enter, and close it behind him. Only one shot or he'd have to wait another day. He watched as the Anbu pressed 2 fingers against his neck, the communicator hidden under his head wrap. The man began walking toward the other end of the hall and Kakashi acted. A flicker landed Kakashi in front of the vent. A flat knife pressed against the edges pried the cover loose from the wall. The fit was tight, but Kakashi had stripped down, only in his black undershirt and tight black pants. This was his go-to outfit for stealth assignments. It took him only 15 seconds to get in the vent and replace the cover. As silent as he could, Kakashi shimmied through the vent. One tight corner and he was facing the archive. Activating the Sharingan, he looked around the room, not seeing anyone in there. He had a very specific list of things to grab. First and foremost, Kushina and Minato's things. Naruto deserved to have something of his parents. And second, all of the paperwork he could find on the Uchiha massacre, Itachi, and Danzo. The only physical item he brought with him was a storage scroll. Inside had folders that would mimic the ones he'd take with him. It would help him take everything out without slowing him down. Naruto's parents didn't have a lot. Much of their items were personal, pictures, scrolls, and books. When Kakashi found the 2 boxes of their belongings, he immediately opened them, seeing what was left. To his surprise, one of the items in the box was a photo album. On the cover, slid into the plastic wrapping, was a picture of Minato and Kushina, Naruto hiding in the prominent bump on her stomach. It was the closest thing Naruto would have to a family picture. Some of the books and scrolls had Uzushio seals marking them. Kakashi sealed the 2 boxes away and moved on to the files. The memories were rising quickly, and Kakashi couldn't afford to waste time. The files were, for the most part, in alphabetical order. It was a sheer coincidence that his 2 male students had surnames beginning with the same letter. He gently ran a finger over the shelves, finding Uchiha first. The file on the massacre was thick, full of autopsy reports and horrifying pictures. The reports here won't be redacted or altered. Sasuke should get the full picture of what happened. There were files on each Uchiha, including Sasuke's parents. He wasn't sure what all the boy would want but grabbed their files along with Itachi's. Next, he dropped down to Uzumaki, grabbing Kushina and Naruto's files. A thick file with Uzushio written on it caught his eye. He grabbed that, also. Heading over to the S section, he began searching for Shimura Danzo. He was through the section 3 times. The file wasn't there. Running a hand through his gray hair, Kakashi fought back a growl. The biggest break in the case, the best bet to expose Danzo and have him removed from power, and he couldn't find the file. It just wasn't there. The only other place it could be is in the Hokage's office. Or Danzo himself has it. Either way, Kakashi couldn't reach it, now. With the things he was taking safely sealed away, and the mimic folders in place, Kakashi was ready to get out of the room. He was nearly at the vent when he heard talking. The doorknob turned and Kakashi threw himself in the vent. The cover slid into place as the door opened. In the opening stood Danzo, one arm and half his face covered. His good eye scanned the room. Taking quick steps, he made his way over to the files, flipping through the J section. Pulling out a folder, he opened it, skimming what was written inside quickly. He set it down and pulled a paper from inside his robe, slipping it in the folder. Kakashi watched as Danzo put the folder back, took another look around, and left the archive. Knowing it was dangerous, knowing he was pushing his luck as it was, Kakashi should have left. But he couldn't. He had to know what folder Danzo was adding papers to. Slipping back out of the vent, he padded over to the shelf Danzo was standing in front of. It took 4 folders before Kakashi found the one. What was inside shocked him. Hidden messages between Danzo and someone who signed his name as X. He had no more mimic folders, but he wanted this information badly. The chance of him ever getting back into the archive using this method was less than ideal. No, he couldn't take the chance. If Danzo knew Kakashi had touched it in any way, but what other choice did he have? Who did he know and trust that could enter and leave the archive at will? Inoichi. He replaced the document and crawled back out with his prizes. He had some work to do before including any other person in his scheme. It was late when he got back to the apartment. The boys were still awake, Naruto sitting without a shirt on while carefully drawing a seal on his arm. Sasuke was leaning against the couch, reading a book. They both looked up when he opened the door. They took in his attire and looked at each other. "Sensei, what were you doing?" Naruto put the brush down and stood up, the seal was half done on his arm. You're dressed for, like, stealth or something." Sasuke put his book down and leaned forward. You retired from the Umbu, so it's not a mission for them. Kakashi laughed and kicked off his sandals. The scroll burned a hole in his pocket, begging to be taken out and its contents freed. Let me change, then I'll explain. I need to get the dust out of my hair. By the time Kakashi was done showering and changing, Naruto had finished his seal. Sasuke was looking it over, turning Naruto's arm this way and that. Your handwriting is sloppy. Naruto pulled his arm back. Yeah, well yours looks like a girl's handwriting. Does not. Does so. There was a shove, a retaliation shove, and then two boys began wrestling on the floor. Kakashi caught the inkpot before it got knocked over, but otherwise left them to it. He set to freeing the items in the scroll, setting them out on the counter of the kitchen. There was a thud and some cursing and the sound of his chair being knocked over. Kakashi ignored it, instead opening up Minato's box and laying the contents on the counter. His three-pronged kunao, some sealing paper, a Fuinjutsu book with notes in the margin, a bracelet Kushina had braided for him when they were younger, his headband, and an infant's toy. Kakashi held that for a long time. He was with Minato when the man had bought it, claiming Naruto would love it. He could still see the smile, feel the elation and hope. Setting it down on the counter, he found the box empty. Moving on to Kushina's, this one was heavier. The first thing he brought out was the photo album. Of anything, Naruto would be most excited about this. There were books for Fuinjutsu, written by the masters in Uzushio. Books on Uzumaki clan secrets, how to control their large chakra reserves, and the village's history. He pulled out several scrolls with flowing handwriting noting what was held inside. Underneath those was her headband. A quick glance up showed the boys rolling on the floor, Sasuke taking a knee to the stomach and having the wind knocked out of him. Kakashi took a chance to open the Uchiha Massacre folder. It was filled with information, hidden secrets Kakashi never knew. It elaborated on things he did know, like Itaka being a double agent. The fact that his first report went to Danzo, Kakashi didn't know. Another thud sounded, followed by more cursing. Sasuke had Naruto on his stomach, one hand pulled painfully behind his back. Sasuke, let Naruto go. Clean up the living room and then come here. I want to show you where I've been. The boys listened, setting the chair upright and straightening up their futons. Still shirtless, Naruto took a seat at the kitchen island, elbows on the granite cradling his head in his hands. Sasuke's a dick, Naruto whined. He doesn't fight fair. Said boy took a seat next to the blonde, glaring at him. It's not my fault you suck. Boys, Kakashi warned, making both of them sit up. First, let me tell you where I've been. This, however, is a secret. It doesn't leave your lips, understood? Both boys nodded. I sneaked my way into the archive. There were things in there you boys deserve to see. Naruto, all of this laying here on the table belonged to your parents. The boy's eyes went wide. This toy here, your father bought for you. He was convinced that, once you were born, you would love it. With a shaking hand, Naruto picked it up, spinning it back and forth to make the drumming sound. This bracelet was made by your mother, given to your father when they were younger. Probably still genin. I think, but I'm not certain, that the red color weaved into it is actually her hair. He let Naruto look closely at the bracelet, tilting it in the light to watch it glint off his mother's hair. This is her photo album. That picture on the front, she's pregnant with you. Naruto's hands were still shaking as he slid the photo album toward himself. Sasuke leaned over, looking through the pictures with the blonde. Slowly turning the pages, he lingered over each photo, taking in every centimeter, every tiny detail. Mom's really pretty. Her hair is so long and straight. You look like her. Sasuke looked from Naruto's face to Kushina's. Like your face shape. Naruto put his hands on his cheeks and looked at Sasuke. All you got from your dad was your hair and eyes. He looked at Kakashi for agreement. Kakashi nodded. Sasuke's right, Naruto. You even laugh like her. It's almost like she's still here when I look at you. They let Naruto get lost in his photos, let him learn about his parents through pictures. Instead, he pulled out Itaka's file and handed it over to Sasuke. You don't have to look at it now, Sasuke. When you're ready. I have the ones on your parents, and the one about what happened. Sasuke's eyes snapped to his. Make sure you're ready. No matter what, it's going to hurt. Prepare yourself. Sasuke nodded but didn't open the file. He just stared at the picture paper clipped to the front. Itachi in his Umbu uniform, flat expression, and mask positioned to the side of his face but looking so young. Sasuke realized that age changes your perception. He was only 7 when Itachi was 13. To him, his brother was older and more mature, he knew everything and was what Sasuke strived to be. Now, at 12, all he could see was a young boy, only a year older than he is now. With shaking hands, Sasuke opened the folder. His Umbu information form greeted him, listing out his stats, skills, abilities, and rank. At the bottom was his team information, listing Kakashi and Tenzo along with their aliases. He never knew which mask his brother had. As a child, he'd never seen it. Itachi was Weasel. The tan uniform in the picture was a stark difference in the clothes he'd normally worn, all black. The next paper began chronicling his missions, both classified and not. His eyes took in all he read, learning how his brother handled unfavorable variables. He was so loyal to Konoha, so by the book, but cared for his teammates. There were multiple times Itachi had saved them while simultaneously finishing the mission. He looked up at Kakashi, a million questions fighting for dominance in his head. Opening and closing his mouth several times, Sasuke couldn't figure out how to word what he wanted to know, how to get the plethora of questions out. Practically reading his mind, Kakashi leaned over the counter and pointed at one of the missions. We teamed up with Shisui on this one. Your brother was usually so serious, so stoic. But, when Shisui was around, he loosened up. Shisui would pick on him, tease him. Usually about you and how soft your brother was for you. He loved to call him Nii-san when Itachi would give him orders. Kakashi softly laughed. Itachi had this frown. Remember, Tenzo and I were older than him, we called him a kid. He looked so young to us. Powerful, but young. Naive. And when he'd frown at us, we couldn't help but laugh. He just looked so comic. Kakashi flipped a couple more pages. This one. Tenzo got stabbed. He still has the scar from it. Your brother kept him alive until I got there. Kept him talking. Tenzo might not be here today if it weren't for Itachi. Then, why? If he was, why would he? I don't know, Sasuke. But, Kakashi tapped the thick folder, maybe we can figure it out. The young boy nodded, flipping back to the info form and just staring at the picture. It was how he remembered last seeing Itachi, in his Umbu uniform. Although in his memory, that uniform was covered in his family's blood. I just want to understand. Kakashi squeezed his shoulder. It was the only solace he could give at the moment. On the table was a scroll, the message encrypted inside was too difficult for Inoichi's analysts to crack. Deciding he needed a shower to calm down before he took a try, Inoichi shut the door to the bathroom and hoped the girls didn't knock on the door. Ino bounced downstairs to grab snacks and saw the scroll laying there. Her father was late getting home today, and when he did get home, he was stressed. She could read her father's body language, and the man was tense. As she threw a bag of popcorn into the microwave, Ino tapped her fingers on the counter, staring down the scroll. If it was stressing her father out, then it must have been difficult. The bag in the microwave began popping. Ino's curiosity won out. She snatched the scroll and unrolled it. It wasn't like any code she'd ever seen before. There didn't seem to be a rhyme or reason to the order. The popping quieted down and the microwave beeped. Ino grabbed a pen and paper, copying the code. If this was a confidential encrypted scroll she wasn't supposed to see, then she'd leave it there. But that didn't mean she wouldn't crack it. Sakura shared the popcorn with her as Ino sat at her desk. At some point Sakura fell asleep, Ino's desk light still on. Ino was hunched over the paper, 2 letters, and their corresponding symbols figured out. She glanced over at Sakura, who was laying on her side, the blanket pulled up to her chin, her hair hanging over her face, moving with each breath. Fondly smiling, Ino stood up and walked over to the bed, brushing the hair back and tucking it behind her ear. For all the name-calling in the academy, Ino didn't actually think there was anything wrong with Sakura. Her light pink hair made her green eyes pop. She had a sweet smile and such a girlish laugh. Her hair was so soft, like silk in your hands. Whatever Sakura was dreaming about put a crease between her eyes. Ino smoothed it out with her pointer finger before returning to the desk. The code pulled her back in, but Sakura's light breathing was a comforting background ambience. It wasn't until the clock read 4 in the morning that Ino jumped out of her chair, scroll decoded. Oh, was it a good one, too? Definitely not a scroll her father would have given her. No, this one was classified. Exhausted mentally, Ino practically fell in bed. She'd show her father in the morning, right now she just wanted to sleep. Her body migrated to the warmth Sakura emitted, cuddling up to her back. It wasn't until their feet were tangled together that Ino drifted off, happily comfortable. Inoichi was late for work the next morning. Laying on the table, next to the scroll no one could decode, laid a piece of notebook paper. His daughter's large and curly handwriting covered the sheet, all the notes she made in cracking the code decorating the page. In the center, underneath the randomly placed symbols, was the answer. 22-65-18 safe under desk all info there left mountain left right red door. He grabbed the paper and the scroll and ran to the Hokage Tower. He had to find Shikaku now. Check the description for the links to the author.